No, I've got a full thing of chai tea here, so I shouldn't do that.
We're on.
Hello.
Hi,
I'll be right back. I'm going to get a beer, and then we'll start the show.
This is what Jeff thinks of you. As soon as he turns you on,
he disappears.
He goes. Nothing, Jeff.
Isn't that just like me? I turn you on, and then I leave. Just leave you hanging.
It's like, hello, goodbye.
Yeah. Hi, I'm off now.
Yep.
Anyway, how have we all been? I see that I was first in the chat room again. Yes. However, it's closely followed by Barbara, Wayne, Liz. Who else we got out there? Liz. Liz is saying an awful lot. Liz, Wayne, Lane. We got Wayne and Lane. Excellent.
Mark Alexander.
Alexandre Paquet. No, Paquet. I guess.
Ian.
Hi, you, sir. Ian Griffin. What a lovely name. I used to have a number.
Brian Parrott.
Griffin. He was a fine, keen chap. Brian Parrott. It's got to be a Monty Python joke in there somewhere.
Oops.
Ouch.
Feedback. I have my speakers on so that you guys wouldn't talk behind my back.
I would say, but we did. I would say, Brian, that the chances are 0 to not very many. So.
Actually, we were reading all this stuff. We were just we could have pushed that button, before 5 o'clock, but we thought, well, that's not right.
No,
we're not going to do that.
Why would we be early?
Right.
We'd like you guys to get a little bit of, get closer to each other. Have a little. I
think it's called fashionably late.
Yes, fashionably late.
Fashionably on time.
Matthew.
After I was ranting earlier this afternoon about people being late.
Yes. Well, but this is different.
I think the scenario is slightly different.
Yeah.
Matt, have you thought of changing your name to Bunting Loop? That might be kind of. That'll make your eyeballs pop out. But.
What does that mean? Is that another English saying? Bunting loop?
Well, no. Bunting is a negative G maneuver. So if you did a bunting loop, you'd do a negative G loop.
So I never heard of bunting as a maneuver.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we used to. That was common in the Royal Air Force.
Oh, then I guess
used to say you'd bunt your brains out. That's it. Potable and bunt your brains out.
Bunt your brains out.
Mm-hmm. I guess I should get the folder for the notebook for today.
Yeah, this would be a good time to do that.
I've already done my homework. So let's put Steph on the spot and give her the first piece of news and feedback quickly.
Fine. It hasn't nothing has come up in the folder yet.
APG 286. No,
well, I think you're one out anyway.
And Steph, why don't you go ahead and start the show?
Excellent.
Let's see. It's not 286. It's 287. No, it's 287. Damn it.
We picked up on that. So.
It was just the first number that came to my mind for some reason.
I liked it the other day when you tried to take it back like 3 episodes or something.
Like 20 episodes. 260 something.
20 episodes. That's right. I was like, huh?
No.
I saw the feedback from Mr. Ganapathy. And I tried to find his father, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of information about. I'm assuming he's an Indian Air Force Air Marshal or an Air Vice Marshal.
Oh, you're talking about PR guns?
Yes.
Ganapathy?
Yes.
Or how would you say that? Ganapathy?
Ganapathy or Ganapathy?
Ganapathy. It sounds like some kind of, I don't know.
No, don't say it. That's not nice.
I stopped myself.
You'll have to comment on Derek's surname, which sounds like what you do in the toilet.
Where's Derek?
Underneath PR Ganapathy.
Oh, and back in the coffee.
So when you sing in the toilet, that's where you have a whistle.
Oh, you're looking at the coffee fund. Okay. I see. So when you have a whiz on.
Exactly. Okay. I try to find Guns' dad to see, just out of interest, anyone who gets that high in any of the Air Forces is normally an interesting bloke. but I couldn't find them. I did find an Indian Air Force gun up at the who flew the Gnat and was and I think he shot down 4 Sabres. You know, the Indians called their little Gnat fighter. It's the same aircraft as the trainer that I trained on. The Sabre Killer.
Ooh, that sounds much more ferocious than
Sabre Killer. Yeah, Gnat.
Exactly.
It sounds like something you like. You're like, get away.
Exactly. It was a tiny wee aeroplane, but there you go. Anyway, so this bloke shot down several, but he passed away a little while ago, so I don't know if it's the same.
Well,
yes, I'm ready to go whenever you are, sir.
Very good. Just looking through here just to see. I'm sure I've forgotten something, but we're going to find out. All right. Everybody in the chat room ready? Oh, hang on.
Recording?
I almost forgot to record.
It's all right. I was going to stab you right then and there.
Thank you. Thank you. Here we go. All 3 tracks are recording. Now I go back to this and say Airline Pilot Guy, episode 287.
Flight 209, you're clear for takeoff. Roger. LA, good morning. 123.9. Roger.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from our side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 1A in the APG headquarters building in Roswell, Georgia. In this episode, a pilot freaks out passengers, an Airbus A320 hits a balloon tether, hell in Houston, and an airline that promises that its flight attendants will remain fully clothed. Feedback and the latest Plain Tales installment. But sir, Harriers don't actually hover. So get all settled in. The tray tables and seatbacks in their upright and locked positions. Electronic devices powered on. Flight 287 is ready for pushback. Hello everyone and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guys Show, an aviation podcast. Probably the most professional one out there. And serious. No, wait a minute. I'm thinking of a different show. This one is about aviation. Yeah, we focus mainly on airline aviation, but we talk about other things as well. And the reason why we focus on that is because many of us, this is what we do for a living. We're airline pilots, except for the lovely Dr. Steph. And so I'm a captain for a major U.S. legacy airline, and joined by, speaking of Dr. Steph, we have a Doctor of Physiatry,
Doctor,
a skydiver, marathon runner, and Miss World 2017 swimsuit winner.
Wow.
And commercial multi-engine instrument rated pilot, of course. That's the most important part. Dr. Steph.
Took that title to a new level there, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Interesting. Guess I should start doing more sit-ups and crunches and things if I got to carry on that.
No, you don't need to.
No, thank you for the lovely introduction as always, and so pleased to be back with you guys for episode 287. Oh, I almost forgot which one it was too.
Great to see you. And also joining us from across the pond, and he's actually across the pond today. He is a former RAF and RAAF fighter pilot and professional photographer, a wide-body Airbus captain for a European carrier. His name, Captain Nick Anderson.
Hi there, Jeff, and hi, Steph. Can't wait to see your issue of Sports Illustrated. Here I am, yeah, and the beard is slowly growing back. Can you see it?
Yeah, looks good.
Yep. Yeah, come on there.
Very
It's
nice.
getting there. Yeah. Anyway, fabulous to be back on the show. Thanks very much. It's 10:15 in the evening here, so hoping for a nice long one because I don't want to go to bed. This is too much fun.
Actually, we're glad that you were able to stay up with us. And hello again from across the pond. And look forward to discussing all of this great stuff on our show today. So, let's see. I guess we can start off with what has been happening with all of us. Captain Nick, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. I have had a week at home, so not much really at all. Been doing family stuff, been catching up on the social media side of things, been communicating with Landon, who's organizing an event in San Francisco. In fact, not exactly San Francisco, in Santa Cruz, on my next trip, which will be on Friday. I'll be out in San Fran on Saturday and a little bit of Sunday. So that's coming up. Other than that, the weather here has been gorgeous. It's starting to break. Unfortunately, low pressure is arriving from over the Atlantic. Why is it you guys send us all your used weather? I don't know. Anyway, it'll be here.
Keep it.
Thanks very much. We don't want it. It's going to be 10 degrees cooler tomorrow.
Ugh.
And it has been quite nice. So we're not really looking forward to all the rain that's coming.
Well, here in the southeastern United States, this time of year, it's still very hot.
Yeah,
So,
I know that. And one thing I forgot to mention is that when it's raining tomorrow, I will be able to dip into this book that I just received yesterday. And it was from Robert Fairbairn, who is one of our Washington listeners, who sent me this. And it's a fabulous book called Down for Double, by Lieutenant General Gordon Graham. Now, he was a World War II pilot in the USAF. He flew Mustangs, and he carried on in the United States Air Force and flew in, I'm guessing, I haven't read too much of the book yet, but I'm guessing all the way through up to the Vietnam War. And he flew, of course, the Phantom, which is one of my favorite airplanes. So I really want to thank indeed, Robert, for sending that. It's very, very nice to get it, particularly since this book has been signed by the author. So I'm really looking forward to reading that. Thank you very much indeed, Robert.
that's awesome. Hey, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Why is it that you guys pronounce lieutenant lieutenant? I don't see an F in there. I'm just curious. I mean, I'm not being critical. I just noticed that.
I did look it up once. I suspect it's from the origin of the word, because it's not a British word. It's probably a French word. And I don't know whether that has to do with it or whether we just bastardized the pronunciation of it when we adopted it. But
I like the way it sounds. Don't get me wrong. I just always wondered about that, and I thought, well, this would be a good time to ask the question.
I say lieutenant, but there's no double O in it. So I don't know where you get that from.
Well, Lieu is pronounced Liu.
You.
Lieutenant.
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 You say lieutenant.
Well, no, because we say R too.
Like Captain Pugwash. Yes.
R. Well, all right.
Well, I'll see if I can find out while Steph's having a chat.
Okay.
Sounds
See,
good.
the Canadians pronounce it that way too. I'm not sure which way she's talking about, but Liz, either the way that Nick does or the way we do, but whatever. Okay.
Lieutenant. No idea.
I don't either, but tomato, tomato, potato, potato. Let's call the whole thing off. And
Potable.
potable. Although in that case,
Not
there's
that one.
only one correct
Potable.
pronunciation.
Potable.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Steph, what
Yes.
has been happening with you?
Oh, let's see. I did a lot of running this past weekend because I have a couple of marathon races coming up. In fact, one is just under 4 weeks away at this point, and I'll get to that a little bit more too. But so I did my 20 miler this past weekend.
How'd that go?
It was long. That's what she said.
That's what she said.
I need to be faster with that.
Sorry.
And
That's what she
no, she wouldn't say that.
She might.
Oh, okay.
You never know.
Yeah. Moving on.
But the day before that, got my aviation related fix stuff in, not actually flying the airplane, but went and made a couple of skydives and had a couple really nice skydives. It was fun to see all those folks down there and see some friends. And it was a really beautiful day for it. I mean, I know you said is it still hot in Atlanta? Because it is not hot here at all.
It's cooler, but it's still warm.
Today was like in the low 70s.
I don't know. I haven't been outside actually. really know.
You have no idea. But anyway,
No.
it's been cooler here, noticeably cooler.
82 right now.
Yeah. And, that makes for really nice skydiving or flying conditions or whatever you'd like to go do. Today is a little more overcast, but that's all right. I'll take it. So it's been a good week, been a good weekend. And yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, the origin of lieutenant.
Okay, shoot.
It was originally from two Latin terms, locum, meaning in place of, and tenentis, meaning holding. Together, the phrase applied to anyone holding in place of or someone else. Over time, locum evolved into the French word lieu, which is pronounced in French as it is spelt. It is possible that when the English heard the French pronounce the compound word lieutenant, they perceived a slurring. It's probably because all the Frenchmen were drunk.
A lot of wine.
Which they heard as a V or F sound between the first and second syllables. Most English-speaking nations, with the exception of the United States, still pronounce the word as though there is an F in it. So it's all about the F in French.
I like what you did with that. Thank you.
Clever.
Those F in French.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Wait, you're admitting that maybe we pronounce something closer to the...
I think you do, yes.
Wow. Score of 1 for...
Yeah.
Need
There you go.
There we
You
go.
and the French. At last you found something in common.
All right, we take it back. No, just kidding. We love the French.
We do. We are the world. We love everyone.
That's right.
All right. So let's see. Let's see. When was it? Saturday. When did we record last week? Was it like Thursday? I think it was Thursday, right? No, Wednesday of last week, didn't we? Because you were
It was straight after the eclipse one. So I think that was a Tuesday. We recorded it on a Wednesday, yeah.
Yeah, Wednesday of last week. Well, on Saturday, this past weekend, I got to meet up with some fine folks at the Scofflaw Brewing Company. Brewery. Is it brewing company or brewery? Well, it's one of those. And the website is scofflawbeer.com. And I have a little bit of audio to play regarding that meetup. So here we go. If I can find the application that I use to play my jingles. Here we go. Hey, we're at the Scofflaw Brewing Company, and with a great group of folks here, aviation enthusiasts and beer lovers, which is probably the most important part of this. And I just wanted to do this before Chris Cochran, right? Yep. He has to go because he has a couple 2.5-year-old twins that need daddy. And I understand that, but he was able to spend a couple hours here with us on this tour at the Scofflaw Brewing Company and drink maybe just like a couple ounces of beer. That's all, really, honestly. That's all he had. Okay, so Chris.
It was a pleasure to meet Captain Jeff here and all the aviation enthusiasts here, and it's a fun time here at Scofflaw, and good to meet up with everybody.
That's it? That's all you're going to say? All right, that's good enough. All right. Here, this guy here is a 330 pilot for some other airline. We can't name it because, well, liability and that kind of thing. His name is Jeff somebody.
Yes, that's Jeff Witt at HefeJet on Twitter. Give myself a little plug. It was very nice meeting you. Yes, very nice meeting you, Captain Jeff, from First Officer Jeff.
Yeah, pass it along.
Hey everybody, Stephen Ivy. Yeah, just enjoying the beer here at Scofflaw. Glad everyone could come out to this. Sounds like we're going to make this a monthly thing for those that live in Atlanta. Going to hit a couple different breweries, and I think there's maybe 12 total in Atlanta. So we have 1 year of trying out breweries for the APG. So it sounds really good.
Hi everybody, Dispatcher Tom here. No branding. You know where to find me, and we're definitely looking forward to more brewery trips with the change in the brewery law in Georgia. So you don't have to buy a tour anymore. Starting, I believe, September 1st. You can just go and have a beer at the breweries. So I look forward to seeing everybody sometime in the near future.
And now we just got to figure out where to go to get the free food after we drink the free beer, right? Exactly. All right. So, yeah, we had a great time on Saturday, August 20-something or other, 6th. here at the Scofflaw Brewing Company. Awesome beer, really it is. And I believe that at least two of us, Stephen and myself, are going to be here in a couple of weeks for their, well, a little bit more than a couple of weeks for their first birthday. They have some really great beers that they're talking about on the 16th. Yeah. So if you're in the Atlanta area, you're listening to my voice right now, plan on meeting up with us on the 16th of September at Scofflaw. And that's it. Over and out. There we go. So we had a great time. As you could tell, you could hear all the laughing in the background. And actually, we sounded pretty coherent for the number of samples that we had consumed at that point. We were just about to leave and head over.
They weren't all pint samples.
No. It was like half pints. They gave us.
What's this about? You have to buy a brewery tour to.
Yeah, I guess you got to buy a tour and then get
weird
the free
alcohol laws in every state, aren't there? So.
Yeah, but you know what? What was interesting is in this brewery warehouse space, most of the people, I thought everybody there was there to go get the tour, and they were drinking, before the tour started, and then it was just a handful of us, the group that I was with, and then maybe another, I don't know, 6 or 7 other people were taken around the brewery and given the whole tour. But most everybody else, I'd say 90% or more of the people that were there drinking were there just to drink. So,
gotcha.
But they had to buy the $14 tour fee.
Gotcha.
But they got free beer.
Well, that's
anyway.
not bad.
They give you 6 little coupon things for samples. And when I say sample, it was like a half a pint. So, decent size sample. And so what would that be? Basically
3 pints for
3 pints for 14. Yeah, so that's actually a pretty good deal.
That's not bad at all.
Yeah. And it was really good beer too. And so I look forward to going back there on their first anniversary. And they have some barrel-aged stuff that probably is only going to last as long as the 16th to drink. So we'll see. Anyway, thank you, Steve and Ivy, for kind of taking up the organization of that group meetup. And yeah, if you want to get together and do an APG meetup somewhere out there, as Dispatcher Mike said, I think he said something about grabbing the bull by the horns, and this is before inflatable on the lake, and organize something, please do, as I guess Landon has done for the meetup out in Northern California this weekend, right?
Yes, he has, very kindly. Landon has organized a meetup for my next trip out to San Francisco. So we're going down to Santa Cruz, and we are going to the Santa Cruz Mountain Brewing. So it's an orgasmic beer brewery in Santa Cruz.
Sounds.
I might head out there for that.
I know, right?
I might have mispronounced that. Sorry, an organic.
Okay.
Company in Santa Cruz.
A little different.
They say an award-winning local Santa Cruz certified, or I can't say it properly now. Organic brewery offering seasonal ales, hard ciders, and more. So that sounds actually brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Landon. Looking forward to seeing whoever can make it down there. I know Fred's going, and obviously I'll be there, and Landon will be there. So that's 3. We'll be able to enjoy ourselves even if no one else pitches up. But I'm really looking forward to that. So that'll be on Saturday, the 2nd of September at 4 p.m. kickoff.
Awesome. And I understand, Steph, that you're going to be involved in some kind of a meetup in Berlin.
Yes, I want to make sure I mention that. September 22nd, it's a Friday. So is that a month from now? I forget how many weeks away that is. 4 weeks or so. We're going to be having a meetup at Private Pilot Tillman's microbrewery, the Circus Microbrewery at the Circus Hostel. It's in Berlin. If you go to their website, www.circus-berlin.de, and you can find all the directions there. I believe we're going to be starting around 7 p.m. And come on out and join us if you happen to be in the area. I would give you the address, but I can't pronounce any of these German words. So best way to find that is to actually just go to the website or do a Google search. So
excellent. And don't forget, Nev is looking to meet up with somebody to buy him beer. in Fairfax, Virginia, Dulles Airport. So
Fair enough.
we don't want to forget about him either. Okay, let's see. Anything else? Oh, I picked up an extra trip Monday. Got back right around midnight last night, and I got to remind myself how lovely it is to ride the employee crew transportation to the crew, the employee parking lot, and it's especially nice after midnight. And let's see, what else was I going to say? Oh, I had picked up something for tonight, an overnight in Sarasota, and then back tomorrow afternoon. And when I arrived back in Atlanta last night, I looked at my messages on my phone, and it said, hey, that trip that you picked up, that 2-day, tomorrow night, has been no opt. So crew tracking decided to, for whatever reason, not operate that rotation. So the cool thing about that is that because I had been awarded the trip and it was on my line, and whether they fly it or not, they still have to pay me for it. So,
woohoo!
Yeah, bonus. Bing, bing. I should play my... Oops, here we go.
I found the address of the Circus Hotel for you, Steph.
Yes, can you pronounce it better than I can?
Yeah, it's number 1 Rosenthaler Strasse. So that's 10119 in Berlin. So it's on the Rosenthaler Platz in the Mid District.
Better than I can do. So
there you go.
I used to live there when I was 6, although I think most of it's worn off now.
Yeah, I think so.
I was telling Jeff earlier that I used to live in 59 Trabener Strasse. So that's about all I can remember of that.
Haven't we all? Haven't we all? All right. And then I have another trip later this week on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And the cool thing about that is that on Thursday I'll be in Raleigh-Durham. Actually, we stay at Chapel Hill at the Carolina Inn, and that gives me relatively close proximity to rent a car and drive over to Elon University, where my youngest is. So I get to meet up with my Natalie on Thursday. So I'm looking forward to that. And that's it. You're all caught up. So now I think it's time for the Coffee Fund.
Johnny, how much more coffee?
No thanks.
I love coffee. I love tea. I love the APG community. Coffee and tea and the Java and me. A cup, a cup, a cup, a cup, a cup. All right. While the telephone rings in the background, I'm going to continue with the Coffee Fund portion of the show here. The Coffee Fund, what is that? Well, that's your way to get even more involved in this outstanding APG community for those who have the financial resources to do so. And we call those folks the Coffee Fund cadre, and they really do help offset the costs of doing the show. So since the last show, we've had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 participants in the Coffee Fund Classic method, basically via PayPal, where you can make a one-time donation or a recurring donation, as Chris Randall does. We received his recurring payment, as Steve Trumbull did as well. Also, Derek Weissong and PR Guns, Ganapathy, and Brandon Begley. So thank you, one and all, for your very generous contributions to the Coffee Fund using the Coffee Fund Classic method. The other way that you can become involved in the show and the Coffee Fund cadre is by becoming a patron at patreon.com. And since the last show, we have Alex. He has made a pledge, and Clinton Baker, Alex Bresnick, I should mention his last name, and then Clinton Baker is one of our producers, executive producers that is, and so we do appreciate that. And Patreon is a way that you can pledge a certain amount per episode, and you also, whether you're using the Patreon method or the classic Coffee Fund method, you have access to a periodic crew log, APG crew log, a little extra audio that we put out there and kind of give you some behind the scenes of what's going on with the APG show. So thanks again, everyone who has contributed. If you want to do that, head over to airlinepilotguide.com/coffee.
Good timing, Jeff.
Thank you.
Stand by for news.
Pilot freaks out passengers with horrific tornado warning. All right. Ladies and gentlemen. Maybe I should do this. Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up for some tornadoes. The pilot of a Newark-bound United flight delivering a chilling warning that kicked up a storm among his terrified passengers, according to the report. He announced that the flight, which had already been delayed in Chicago 2 hours on Tuesday, would encounter terrible storms. Here's a quote from Pamela Kent, a Princeton resident who was traveling with her daughter Jessica. He seemed angry. He said, "We're going to be flying through horrific storms, including tornadoes." Adding to the apocalyptic atmosphere, the pilot also instructed passengers on the overbooked flight to get to know your neighbors. I don't think he asked them to start praying, though, as the guy did off of, what was it, off of
that was
Perth?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot what airline one that was. Anyway.
Asian Airlines, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. The passengers were so terrified that a flight attendant made an announcement to try to allay fears blowing through the cabin, saying the pilot didn't mean it would be unsafe to fly. There were tornado warnings across Warren County in New Jersey and parts of Pennsylvania late Tuesday as heavy rain pummeled the mid-Atlantic region. In fact, I think this is about the time that you were coming into New York on your last trip, Captain Nick. So there was some, pretty nasty weather heading that way.
Yeah, there was a line of storms, but it wasn't vast. It wasn't like it was all-encompassing.
No. Buckle up for tornadoes. Come on. It's going to be horrific. Let's see. When the plane finally prepared to taxi, the pilot got back on the intercom to notify the passengers that the plane had to return to the gate because of a maintenance issue. Right. That was the last straw for about 50 passengers who demanded to be let off to seek alternate ways to reach Newark. Let's see. Another passenger said, "It was a general feeling of being rattled. You want a pilot to have confidence. That was not the feeling." By the time they got back to the gate, the crew timed out. And so I'm thinking, I don't know. You know how these things are. This is a report from
the New York Post.
New York Post.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's hard to know exactly what was said on the PA because a lot of times you'll say something and then somebody hears it totally differently. But if this is the case and this guy was making this kind of a PA, well, that's inappropriate. You do want to be reassured when you hear our voices on the PA system, and you don't want to be rattled, as I guess this guy did with his passenger. It sounded to me like he was not very excited about flying to New York or Newark in this weather.
Well, and already delayed, right? Like, so just probably a frustrating day, has to fly through bad weather. Yep, this is really going to be horrible. Sorry. This is what we're looking at. So
yeah. And I'm wondering what the maintenance issue is. Lane says he thinks that he knows what the maintenance issue was. Replace the nut holding onto the yoke. So anyway, so the guy didn't have to fly to Newark. But, here's the way this works. A lot of times, being an airline pilot, you pretty much go 99.9% of the time. And that's why they give us extra fuel for holding in case the weather is bad, and we can kind of wait it out sometimes and sometimes not. That's why they give us fuel to go to a diversion alternate. And so when you go out there, there's a chance that you're not going to make it to the destination. But although we do make every effort to try to get you to the place that you've paid for on your ticket to get, to your destination. But sometimes we don't make it. And if safety is going to be a factor and terrible storms, horrific storms, including tornadoes are there, well, guess what? We go somewhere else and everybody's safe and sound. But this guy sounded like he was, I think you're right, Steph. He was probably getting close to a very long duty day, and he was kind of teed or pissed off that he had to continue flying and, flying into a long day. And then
you just lose your filter at that point,
Yeah.
It's like you just start saying the things that you're thinking and not going, is that really what I should be saying here? Meh, just going to say it.
Right. I understand that too. I mean, sometimes you get frustrated.
I think everyone's been there, but that's where your professionalism has to
Yeah.
come in and realize that you're getting paid to do this job, and you can't just say whatever it is that you would really like to say because there's probably going to be consequences.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I
Words
think you're
mean
exactly right, Steph. And profession is what it comes down to. The passengers generally can only judge what kind of a person you are from what you say over the PA. Very few of them actually get to meet you in person and talk to you. So what you say over the PA is vital if you want to keep their confidence. And we know that confidence in flying is difficult for a lot of people. So it may be difficult for him if he's had a very long day and it's a particularly frustrating trip. But really, honestly, you got to keep it together, guys. That's why we like doing this job, because we're the kind of people that can do that.
Yes. So true. Well, speaking of horrific weather, what was it, Friday? Was that when the Hurricane Harvey finally made landfall down in the Texas Gulf Coast? And it's still down there. I don't think it's a hurricane anymore, but it's still a tropical system.
Just
and
sitting there.
Just twirling around, just dumping feet of rain. I think some places getting more than 4 feet of rain already.
I can't even imagine, that's just incredible.
Lots of
The amount
flooding.
water.
I know every time we get the news, it sounds even worse. The reservoirs are in danger of overflowing and bursting, and huge areas of the city are underwater. So I've got great sympathy with everyone there. And this damn storm is moving so slowly that it's going to take perhaps a day or even 2 to clear, and it will just continue to pour. So it's just not good.
According to AT Online, Houston Intercontinental and Houston Hobby Airport, the 2 major commercial airline airports, are closed, and because of severe flooding in Houston in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, significantly affecting United Airlines. They have a big hub there, and Southwest Airlines. It's a pretty big location for them as well. More than 5,000 flight cancellations in the U.S. are estimated as a result of the hurricane so far, and this is as of sometime earlier today, I believe. So anyway, it's a big mess down there. They have not only people stranded, but they have, I guess airline crews and airline workers are also people. They're stranded as well. I was reading some reports of air crews that have been there for many, many days, and they're going to be stuck there for who knows how long. I was there back in 2001, in June of 2001. If you look at, I was looking at the Weather Channel earlier today, and they were showing a list of the greatest amounts of water dumped by a tropical system, and I think it was number 3 or number 4. I think Hurricane.
I think it wasn't even a hurricane.
No.
It was a tropical storm.
It was a tropical storm,
and I can't remember the name of it, but it was summer of 2001.
Allison.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And that was a storm where we got in. And we thought that Allison had been around, kind of the same thing that Harvey was doing, and just kind of hanging around. And then finally it was moving out. As we were coming in from Atlanta, this storm was moving out. And it was actually a nice day that afternoon when we walked over to the Mexican restaurant across the major highway there. And as we were walking back after we had a nice meal, Guadalajara, I think was the name of the restaurant, we were walking back to our hotel, and all of a sudden, these big giant drops started dropping again. We're going, I thought this thing was moving out. And then we went to the hotel and went to bed because we had like a 3:30 pickup in the morning. And when I got up and I opened up my drapes in my room, I looked down at what used to be roads, and it was all flooded. It looked like just we were in a lake, and cars were floating, and it was just it was amazing just to see what had happened overnight. Because guess what? What did I call it? Allison had shifted back over Houston and continued to dump more rain. And I think 20 people died in the flooding in that event.
Well, they generally like retire or don't use names of particularly bad storms. I think that's the only tropical storm to have a name retired.
Oh, really?
How much?
They don't want that one again.
No, not at all. So
yeah. So I was. I think I was only stuck there for another day. I think we were able to get from where we were west of downtown out to the Houston Intercontinental Airport and out of there. I was actually impressed with the driver of the limo company that he seemed to know which roads to take to get us out of there. But that was interesting.
Just got a notification on my phone from the Weather Channel app. It says Tropical Storm Harvey sets preliminary lower 48 U.S. rainfall record with 51.88 inches.
Wow.
It's a lot of water.
That is a lot. Amazing.
Incredible.
Okay, so our thoughts, prayers are for all of you that are affected by this terrible storm and flooding in the Texas Gulf Coast area, which I guess is slowly shifting up toward the Louisiana coastline, and New Orleans most likely going to be affected by this as well. So, not good.
No, not good.
Definitely not. Jeff, before you move on,
yeah.
Brian Parrott in the chat rooms asked me to cover this this poster that's behind me. So if you don't mind, I'd like to mention that it's all about Airbus airplanes, and it's got A320s and A330s and A340s and A350s and A380s. So I could mention all the airlines. I hope that's covered it sufficiently for him.
Okay. I think that that more than does it. So it's nothing but Airbus airplanes, huh?
Very thorough.
Coverage. Yeah, no Boeings on it at all. Just like
okay. Alrighty. Let's see. I just saw this. This is kind of interesting. Pittsburgh. For if you live in the Pittsburgh area, great news. You can drive all the way to Coriopolis, Pennsylvania, to the Pittsburgh airport. Go through all the hassles of security to go shopping.
Yay!
Yay! I'm thinking.
I love shopping at the airport.
Wow, really?
Although, to be fair, they have a lot of nice shops in that airport.
They do have a lot of nice shops, for sure, but you got to really go out of your way to get to them.
I mean, the airport's not really near anything unless you happen to be in Coriopolis or have to go to the airport for some other reason, such as to catch a flight.
And if you were going to catch a flight, you'd have your ticket and you could get through security without a problem. But if you wanted to go just shop or maybe meet somebody coming in, you remember the old days before all of the security, before 9/11, if somebody was coming in from somewhere, you could actually go through security and meet them at the gate as they were getting off the airplane. Well, looks like now you can do that at Pittsburgh, or at least coming up soon. September 5th, I think, is the first day of this program where you can get a My Pit Pass that enables you to go through the security checkpoints, access the airport shops and restaurants between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And this program is the first of its kind in the U.S. There are currently no plans to expand it to other airports at this time.
Hooray!
Yeah. TSA did not need to hire additional personnel to accommodate this program because many of us were sitting around doing nothing anyway. No, I added that part. And we will have the staff we need at Pitt to handle the additional influx of people. TSA also does not anticipate that there will be any impact on checkpoint wait times. So just thought that was interesting, kind of doing the retro thing at Pittsburgh.
I think it's funny, they mentioned just this is so that people can access the shops and restaurants, but once you're through security there, you can still go to the gates if you wanted to. There's nothing that, there's no other checkpoints or barriers or anything like that, correct?
Correct. So it's just as if you had a regular boarding pass to take a flight somewhere. It's just a kind of a day pass to access everything on the other side of security.
Cool.
And they say it's okay. That's not unsafe because you're going to go through the same kind of security screening that you would if you were flying somewhere. So
sure.
We'll see how that goes.
I'm just thinking if you're in a bit of a hurry, a bit late for your flight, you're going to have to queue up behind a whole bunch of shoppers. And even when you get through security, instead of having a straight path now to your gate, you're going to have to fight through all these people who are buying stuff and not getting on airplanes and
You know,
just
you know
getting
what I
in your
think?
way.
I don't think anyone's going there just to go shopping. I think that's why it's going to work and be okay.
I think it's an effort from these stores probably just to stay alive.
Yeah.
You know, trying to get as much, you know, traffic as they can.
Yeah, much revenue. Yeah.
Yep, that's it too. That's the word I was looking for. Okay, moving on. I saw somebody tweet some pictures of this, and when it was on Twitter, it said this airplane hit a balloon, and then you could see the right engine nacelle. And I'm thinking, what kind of balloon did this guy hit to cause these huge gashes through the cowling of the intake of the CFM56 engine on their, or whatever it was. I don't know if it was a CFM56.
It was a CFM56.
Okay. On a Airbus A320-200. And then doing some research for the show, I came across this on the AV Herald, the Aviation Herald, and a Jazeera Airways Airbus A320-200 was flying from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia to Kuwait. They were on approach to Kuwait City when ATC issued instructions to maintain 5,000 feet and to join a left-hand holding pattern at waypoint IVETA, due to another aircraft arriving with a medical emergency, and they had priority. So, while in the holding pattern at 1614 local, the right-hand engine contacted the cable of a military captive balloon, let's see, rising up to about 5,000 feet AGL. The balloon deflated and slowly fell to the ground. The crew did not observe any abnormal engine indications and continued for a normal landing on Kuwait's runway 15 right. A post-flight inspection revealed a sliced engine inlet, and serious damage along the engine cowl. Fan blades appeared to be intact. The aircraft was unable to continue its schedule. It's still on the ground in Kuwait about 31.5 hours after landing. And so in the report here on the Aviation Herald, it has, well, pictures of this cowling, and it really is amazing that it didn't do more damage. And it's probably a good thing that it hit the right engine cowling and not any other part of the airplane, I'm thinking. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It also shows a picture of the cable on the ground, and
it's a pretty decent sized cable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a simple steel hawser either, does it? It looks like it might have some electrical components in there. I'm just wondering what kind of a balloon it was.
Adam said it was a tethered radar balloon.
Yes, a military balloon. And so if you look at the approach plate to the instrument approach chart to this approach, the RNAV GNSS runway 15 right, you'll see that at the IVETA initial approach fix point where the airplane was coming to, and then the controller told them to enter a left-hand holding pattern, on the chart itself, you'll see a little circular area, which is a restricted area, where it says that from, I think, ground to 15,000 feet is restricted. You're not supposed to fly there because of the balloon being there. But air traffic control apparently directed them to do so. So that's kind of odd.
Yeah, you kind of assume that air traffic must know that the danger area is not active, or they've had a clearance or some sort of coordination, particularly on a left-hand pattern, because assuming that they orientated that hold in the direction they were about to enter the RNAV approach, which was along Aveta towards Datar, and you just do a left-hand pattern at Aveta, the end of your holding pattern is going to be right in that danger area.
Yeah. I mean, you can see that where they put the overlay on Google Earth, and from the FlightAware data, it goes right into the center of where that circular restricted area is.
Yep. So I'm just going, what on earth were they thinking? And having said that, I'm assuming this is a reasonable sized balloon to certainly carry that length, 5,000 feet of cable that heavy. It's got to have a fair lifting capacity. I'm assuming it was quite big. So
quite large.
I'm just wondering what the flight crew would do. Was it at night?
No, it was at 4:14 local time.
But even then, I mean, even large balloons can be difficult to see.
And that balloon may have been higher up too.
Right.
They were at 5,000, but maybe the balloon was higher
and
up.
I think they hit the cable.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, they didn't hit the balloon. Oh, you know what? Micah is protesting in the chat room. He says it's not a balloon, folks. It's an aerostat.
He's quite radicus.
And in fact, he's writing in all caps. He's yelling right now. He's yelling at his computer. Calm down, main man Micah. Calm down.
Yes, but if we had started off with aerostat,
people would be going, huh?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. we understand, Micah. Yes.
The report said the aerostat, the military captive balloon, otherwise known as an aerostat, rising up to about 5,000 feet. So that's why the balloon would be smack in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows exactly where it was, but you're right. It's a good thing they didn't hit the balloon. Or why didn't they see it? I guess it's kind of hazy in Kuwait City this time of year. Probably most time of year.
Often is, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Might be the sun. I don't know.
Yeah, there was a PT covering this. Oh, must be talking about aerostats or something. Yeah. PT, what does that stand for? Plane something?
Private talk.
Physical therapy.
Physical therapy. There we go. All right. Of course, we're talking about plane tails. Thank you, Liz. Okay. Anything else to say about this? Just that the only thing I can say is, wow, that was a close one. If it hit the wing, I would imagine that the outcome may have been not so good. I don't know. Maybe they would have just had a dent in their wing.
Yeah, probably hard to say, right?
Yeah.
Good outcome, nonetheless.
Yes, for sure. For sure. A cutter, whatever you want to call it, QATAR Boeing 787-800 was flying from Doha to Denpasar, Indonesia, with 240 people on board. They were at flight level 390. And they were just south of Hyderabad. How do you pronounce that?
Hyderabad.
Okay. When the captain reported the first officer, age 40, had lost consciousness after complaining about chest pain. It's not good. And decided to divert to H City for a safe landing on runway 27 left. I'm just reading what it says. No, I'm just kidding. Didn't say that. About 30 minutes later, and the first officer was treated and stabilized at the airport, subsequently taken to a hospital. The hospital reported the first officer was taken to intensive care and was fully stable. So they continued on. Not sure if they found another crew member or if they were legal just to go with the the extra augmented crew member from that point on. But the point of this, and the reason why I clipped it, was another example of the fact that even seemingly healthy people and relatively young, 40, can suffer, catastrophic medical incidents. And this is the reason why we have more than one of us up there in the cockpit.
Absolutely.
So.
Yep.
Just wanted to mention that for those of you who are fans of airplanes flying around with nobody at the controls, or maybe one pilot at the controls.
But bear in mind, Jeff, there's an awful lot of Microsoft flight simmers out there who would just love to have the opportunity of stepping up and
that's true. That's
put an
true.
airplane on the ground.
Yeah, then maybe I shouldn't have even mentioned it. Thank you. Here's one for Captain Nick. Lufthansa, although in the comments they protest and say it was not Lufthansa, it was City something. City Link?
Yeah.
Okay.
City Line.
City Line. Okay. Well, anyway, according to Simon on the Aviation Herald, I guess he hasn't buckled to everybody's protestations. A Lufthansa Airbus A340-300 was flying from Frankfurt, Maine to Philadelphia, landed on Philadelphia's runway 9 right. During the rollout, the number 3 engine, a CFM 56, inboard right hand, shut down on its own. The crew maintained routine communication and taxied to the apron. And let's see, the aircraft was unable to depart for its return flight and remained on the ground until August 19th, so about 4 days before returning to service. And the Aviation Herald received information that a broken contact obviously caused the LP shutoff valve to shut the engine down. I guess that's the low pressure shutoff valve. I'm not sure what they're talking about there.
Yes, it's the low pressure as opposed to the HP, the high pressure shutoff.
Okay. That's Hewlett Packard. Obviously.
Obviously.
Obviously. A broken contact. So, like on a circuit board, is that what they're talking about, or an electrical contact?
Because it seems a little unlikely that the valve would shut itself if it just lost electrical input.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure these valves take a bit of moving, and I've had some stuck open before now when they've tried to shut the engine down. You'd think it would probably fail safe open if it lost power. So I'm not too sure on the validity of this report because you actually need an input to move a valve like that usually. So I'm not sure. And there's an awful lot of highly technical discussion and a lot of in the comments left about the authority of the FADEC, the electronic.
Well, it's full authority, of course.
Yes,
I'm not sure who the full authority goes to, but there is full authority out there somewhere.
Yes, the full authority digital engine controller, which basically controls all the systems on the engine. Whether it's capable of moving that valve, I know it's capable of moving the HP valve, and to be fair, I stopped flying this airplane quite a few years ago, and the A340-600 I fly has Rolls-Royce Trents on it. So I'm really not up with the CFM 56 system. So I can't really comment on it, but it just seems unlikely that a simple lost, broken wire would shut that valve. Having said that, there are different phases of flight for the Airbus at which different things happen. And one of those phases is when the speed reduces in your rollout, and you'll often get some warnings come up just as you're clearing the runway because they've been inhibited. They don't want to distract you because they're too minor to be concerned about during the final approach and the landing. And it may be that the FADEC decided that there was a fault with the engine, but it wouldn't do anything about it until the aircraft was safely on the ground and the speed was so low that it no longer thought you needed the engine, in which case it might have done something to protect itself. But without more information, I can't really comment on that.
It would be a surprise, I would imagine. All of a sudden you look and you go, well, what is all this going on? Oh, the engine just shut down.
Yeah, particularly without some warnings. I mean, I've had an engine shut down on me like that on the ground. Because a servo that controlled the inlet guide vanes had failed. And when I tried to open the throttle, the engine refused to accelerate. And then after a little while, the FADEC decided that there was a fault, and it just said engine fail. And the engine wound down. So there you go.
Has it ever happened to you?
That has happened to me, yes, absolutely. Okay. So, when you get an engine failure, because, there's obviously a major fault with it, you expect the engine to wind down. But why they didn't have a warning with it, I don't know. Whether this is an entirely accurate report, I'm not sure.
It may not be, yeah. Well, it was on the internet, though.
Has to be true. Everything on the internet is true.
Got to be accurate.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's on our show where we have at least a 50% accuracy rating.
Yeah. So
everything is true 50% of the time.
I think that we've crept up into the 51, 52% range already.
Better than half.
All right. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. This one caught my attention.
Sure it did.
Let's see. Vietnamese airline Vietjet has promised that all flight attendants on their soon-to-be-opened route from Ho Chi Minh City to Jakarta will be fully clothed after Indonesian authorities raised concerns. So apparently, I'm not sure what they're saying here, but apparently this is music inside the airplane where the flight attendants in their bikinis and modest cover-ups dance through the narrow body aisles. And there's a YouTube video if you want to watch it. Apparently, the YouTube video is showing the unsanctioned PR stunt. The airline was fined 20 million dong.
Wow.
Yes, you heard me right. 20 million dong, which is about $880.
How big's a dong?
Well,
not very much, actually.
Oh, Steph should know. She's a doctor.
Yeah, those of us with experience.
okay. So anyway, they were sanctioned. The $880 for the unsanctioned PR stunt has since become synonymous with bikini-wearing flight stewards, and regularly uses them in advertising campaigns. Because of this reputation, when the carrier announced that it was opening a route to the capital of Indonesia, officials in the conservative Muslim country raised concerns, and the airline's deputy director for commercial affairs said, however, that nope, we're going to insist that our flight attendants keep their clothes on, at least while they're working the flight.
Mm.
Bam. Not loud enough. Bring it up. Here we go. Thank you. I just couldn't resist. I saw that.
I'm not surprised. I love the way it says they shot to prominence. But anyway, they apparently were bikini-clad beauty pageant contestants.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh no, it's since become synonymous with bikini-wearing flight stewards.
Yeah.
Flight stewards wearing bikinis. How weird is that?
That actually conjures up a completely different image in my mind, which I don't really want to visit at all.
I'm not too sure about the accuracy of this report either, Jeff.
As a former swimmer, I have no problem with any of this. It's fine. I say go for it.
Okay. So the next time we see Steph, we'll be playing the that music I just played.
It's a good idea.
Well, I'll put it. It can go along with my calendar. Or pageant, whatever.
Yes, we're Miss World 2017 swimsuit competition winner.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, that's enough of that. I think it's now time for us to move on to the best part of the show. Your feedback.
Captain, incoming message.
Let's see, would somebody like to start with Landon's feedback, or I can read it if you'd like.
Is that Landon taxi questions?
Yes.
Oh, good Lord. Hey, Captain Jeff, Doctor, Captain Steph, Captain Yes, Captain Dana, Captain Nick, Miami, Rick, wherever in the world you may be. We need an APG special with Miami Rick. We demand rickets. Well, you can probably get the rickets, but whether you get the Miami Rick or not, Landon, I don't know. Anywho, that's what you say, isn't it, Jeff?
Yes.
Landon, I wanted to say it was great meeting Nick in the city, San Francisco, and look forward to meeting you too again, Jeff. We all had a blast at the Last Drop Tavern and hate that I had to leave early, but I had to keep Natasha happy. I'm sure you did that very well. It is truly amazing that all of us APGers could get together from all walks of life and talk aviation. I definitely made some great new friends that have a common interest, flying. We have to keep it going. Dana, Steph, and Rick have to come and give the left coast some love too, because it's the best coast. But to the feedback part, I wanted to know if captains, as part of their upgrade training, go through a comprehensive training segment on just taxiing the airliner. I know that the Mad Dog has a tiller on one side, as most airliners do. I know that the Square Bus, Nick, has a tiller on both sides, as well as the 777s. Do each pilot in the buses take turns taxiing the aircraft? But for the ones that are upgrading an aircraft with a single tiller, what all is taught in the upgrade class? Is taxiing with a tiller easier than is taxiing with a tiller easier with a tiller? I'm not sure.
As opposed to like in a general aviation aircraft where it might just be with rudders only.
Yeah. Can you put it on two wheels going around a corner? Nick, when you're taxiing a scare bus around, will the bus compensate an automatic increase in power when it's taxiing up a hill? An example would be like at KATL when you're traveling downhill to the middle of the airport and up the other side. You're in a kind of a bowl. Well, I guess that's a lot of questions. There are a few. Keep the shows coming. Keep the West Coast meetups rolling. Blue skies and tailwinds, Landon. Well, I bet you can take the beginning part of that, Jeff.
Okay. So is there a comprehensive training segment on just taxiing the airliner? Well, at my company, sadly, no. Nobody said a thing about it to me when I upgraded to captain. And on my IOE, I was just kind of on my own. I'm thinking, isn't anybody going to give me some pointers here about taxiing the airplane? I guess they assume that by the time you're upgrading to captain, you've seen people taxi the airplane before and you know how to do it. And so, of course, the very first thing that I did after starting up a couple of the engines on the 727 was I asked my first officer, the training captain, when I was doing my initial operating experience, I said, go ahead and call for taxi. And so he called for taxi clearance, and we received it from the ramp controller, and I proceeded to push the throttles up. And I'm thinking, wow, it's taking a lot more power than I thought it would. And then finally, somebody tapped my shoulder and pointed to the parking brake release handle. And I went, oh,
Very nice.
It does taxi a lot better when you have the parking
small
brake
details. Yes.
off. So, and then on my very first trip by myself as a captain, I flew into Little Rock for that charter. It was a White House press corps charter, and we had to go to a different part of the airport, not the part with the terminals and the wide taxiways and that kind of thing. No, the place where the fixed base operations are, and they have taxiway widths appropriate for general aviation aircraft. And I'm thinking to myself the whole time, don't go off the pavement. Don't go off the pavement. Don't hit the wing of that Beechcraft Bonanza. It's like it was very, very interesting. So yeah, so I guess I should just say no. I didn't get any instruction whatsoever on how to taxi an airplane. I'm not sure if you received something, Nick, at your company.
Well, yeah, the Airbus, of course, you can steer it from either side, and the first officers steer it whenever it's their handling sector. So as soon as we started the engines, which the captain does, he hands over full control to the first officer who drives it out there. Now, the Airbus is not an easy airplane to taxi. For a start, the 340s are extremely long. So the 600 has taxi cameras to help you run the nose wheel appropriately close to the edge of the taxiway when you're going around a sharp corner. And you can keep an eye on the main wheels to make sure that you don't drag them off the taxiway on a sharp corner onto the grass or start trampling over taxi lights and things. So that's not really the hardest bit. You do learn to compensate for that. And basically it means driving the cockpit way over the grass on a sharp corner so that the nose wheel, which is some distance behind you, is still on the taxiway when you start the corner. If you were just turned as if you were driving a car with your backside in the middle of the road, you'd be off the taxiway very quickly. I know the hardest problem is the fact that it's a steer-by-wire tiller. So you can turn the tiller quite fast, or in fact turn it as fast as you like. The nose wheel can only turn at the rate at which the nose wheel steering will drive it. So it's very easy for you to demand an amount of tiller movement, but you've got to wait for the nose wheel to physically catch up. And when it has, and you don't really know when it's exactly caught up, you do get a feel for it after a while. You then got to judge whether that's enough turn you've put in. And then you've got to adjust it a little more or a little less. And it really takes a bit of practice to know how far to swing that tiller when you're going into a corner. Otherwise, if you start moving it around too much, the nose wheel steering will just jerk the aircraft back and forth, and you'll have all the cabin crew who are trying to do their safety demos sitting on their backsides in the aisles instead of standing up looking elegant. So that's the hardest bit. Just getting used to that lack of lack of connection between the actual tiller and the nose wheel. So the tiller moves, and the nose wheel then tries to catch up with where you've put it, and you just hope you've put it in the right place to get the amount of steering you're looking for. And when it comes to the aircraft providing power, now it's up to the pilot to move the throttles if he needs it. Most of the time, particularly with anti-ice on, when you get a little bit more ground idling, the engines are quite powerful enough just to push the airplane along nicely at idle power. If you're going into a sharp corner, though, the nose wheel does turn quite a long way, and it provides quite a lot of resistance. And because we don't have the center body gear steering, like you do, say, on a 747, you do tend to scrub the tires, the main wheel tires, a little bit as you go around a corner, and that creates a lot of friction. So you do sometimes have to anticipate with a little bit of power just to keep the airplane turning, because the last thing you want is halfway through a turn, the airplane grinds to a halt, because you need quite a lot of power to get it moving again, and you don't want to blow all the vehicles and things that might be behind you when you open up those taps to try and get the airplane turning again. Because Jeff turned himself off.
He did.
Interestingly,
there he is.
There we go. I'm thinking I'm not hearing myself. Oh, interestingly, you mentioned the oversteering on the 600, 340 600. We on the, not quite as bad, of course, as the 340 that you fly, Captain Nick, but on the Mad Dog, if you look at it, it's one of the longest wheelbase airplanes out there. Especially when you compare it to most of the narrow bodies out there. The nose wheel to where the main gear is on the stretched, I call it the DC-9 ER, the Mad Dog, is quite a distance, and that kind of bites people when they fly other airplanes and then they shift to the Mad Dog and taxi that thing around and not realizing the fact that the main gear is really, really far back. And so we have to oversteer as well. Of course, the nose wheel isn't behind us. It's like pretty much right where we're sitting. That's where the nose wheel is located. But sometimes we have to pretend that we're in a big, giant, wide-body airplane when we're taxiing it. When we're making some sharp 90-degree turns, we have to do a lot of oversteer on my airplane as well. Otherwise, you end up rolling over taxi lights and that kind of thing. And apparently, they get a little upset about that when you destroy their taxi lights and go through mud.
Cost a little bit of money and
does a little bit of damage. Paperwork.
Up a tire too.
Yeah, well, we don't have any cameras or anything like you guys have. That'd be kind of cool.
Well, it is kind of cool, but they're not actually an MEL item, so you can go with them broken, and they're frequently broken. So,
bummer. Yeah. Well, I don't have any interesting taxiing stories because it's relatively easy to do in a general aviation aircraft. But I will say, I had a couple encounters with people driving today who apparently have no idea how to steer their vehicles. So those people could use a remediation course. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, Stephanie was definitely challenged today from our fellow humans.
Yeah, there were a few instances. Yeah. And I didn't even tell you about the first one. That was at Starbucks this morning. So.
Oh, it started that early, huh?
Started that early. Starting the day off right. Yeah.
Oh, the humanity.
Yes.
Now, Steph, when you steer a light aircraft, you have got toe brakes on the rudders, yep. So if you can put a rudder on, and with the prop wash, you can often get a bit of turn from that, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
If not, then you can just dab those toe brakes.
And some aircraft like the Diamond and the Cirrus have a free castering nose wheel, so you have to actually steer with some differential braking in most cases.
Yeah, that reminds me of the Hunter. That was a similar system. It had a free castering nose wheel. And then you had a bicycle brake on the back of the control column.
Oh, really? Like a handlebar brake?
Exactly like a handlebar brake, mounted vertically with a cable on it, just like a bicycle.
Interesting.
On the back of the control column. Now, when you pulled that, you applied the brakes. Now, they applied evenly if you had the rudder central. But as you moved the rudder to one side or another, they applied more brake to one wheel than the other. So to go around a corner, you had to release the brake, put some rudder on, then you dabbed at this handlebar brake, and so that only one wheel would brake, and then the airplane would start to slither around the corner. I'm not kidding. That was a nightmare to taxi around that airplane. just getting that coordinated was terrible for us students.
Well, and with your smaller multi-engine aircraft, you can use differential power too to help you steer through corners. And oftentimes you don't need much, even in the way of rudder steering, to get around a not so sharp corner. So
then we use or at least I do on the Mad Dog, using reverse thrust when you're coming off the runway and you have to make a a nice sharp turn, I'll use a little bit of differential reverse to kind of help the turn around and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think our book allows us to use differential power. We don't use it very commonly.
Yeah.
Perhaps if we're on a particularly slippery taxiway, contaminated conditions, we'll sometimes use differential power because the nose wheel steering, those nose wheels will slither along. Particularly if you've got a sharp corner, you deflect the nose wheel too far, it just slides along sideways. The airplane shows no tendency to move whatsoever. So we'll bang a bit of differential power to get the aircraft swinging around. The only time that I have to be careful is that when we've got full deflection on, if you use differential power at that point, you can actually over deflect the nose wheel steering system and break it.
That's a bad feeling when you're turning the nose wheel steering and you're continuing to go straight.
Yes, I know. We've been there, done that. And even worse when you're doing it on wet piano keys is you're trying to get onto the runway and going across the painted bits, you don't get any nose wheel steering.
Slippery.
Then you hit the black bit between them, and there's a graunching side of the airplane, lurches to one side, then it hits another painted bit and stops turning. It's really difficult.
Oh, my other interesting taxi story is when I was still pretty new captain on the airplane. We were taxiing out in Orlando, and we were coming off the ramp, and I've got a good bit of speed, and I start turning the airplane to the left to follow the taxiway, and it wasn't turning. And I was like, why is this not turning? And I'm looking straight ahead of me, and in Orlando, Florida, in between the taxiways, a lot of them have like water traps. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to go into the water. And I started doing some differential braking. And then I looked down and saw that the electronic hydraulic pumps weren't on. That was something that the first officer skipped. And I went, would you mind please turning those on? And as soon as he did, boom, I finally got some nose wheel steering back. But I almost went into one of those water ponds or whatever in between the taxiways. That got my attention. So now it's one of those things in my cross-check when I'm taxiing, to make sure that I have all the hydraulic pressure necessary to actually steer the airplane.
Love it.
All right. And another thing on the Mad Dog, one of those idiosyncrasies is that when they disconnect the towing bar, they move a little lever, and it's actually connected with a cotter pin, and it's called a flyaway. Actually, they disconnect the cotter pin, and this thing flies away. So if it's not connected with the cotter pin, then it means that our nose wheel steering is going to work. But it deactivates the hydraulic pressure to the nose wheel steering system. So when they're towing pushing the airplane back and that kind of thing, that there's no problem with the pressure. And sometimes they forget to move that flyaway switch to the proper position, so it's still cotter pinned and you don't have any nose wheel steering at all. But usually that's something that you notice right away, because as soon as you try to move the tiller doesn't move. So you stop and then you call somebody and tell them, could somebody come back out and do the nose wheel steering pin, please?
Aren't they supposed to show it to you as they walk away from the airplane?
It's not actually in airplanes that I've flown where they actually pull a pin and it has like a big red flag on it and they show it to you. Well, there's nothing to show us. It's like it's all self-contained on the nose wheel steering mechanism.
Fair enough.
They'd have to take a picture and send it to you on your cell phone or something. Here you go. Look.
Yeah.
That'll work.
Usually what they'll do is like the guy or gal that was in charge of doing that operation will, as they're walking away, usually with their back to you, just kind of give you a thumbs up. Like, I did it. And you should be able to steer the airplane, but
good luck.
Sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
You mean they don't turn around and salute you? Oh, dear.
No, there's another person that does that, and that person is supposed to make sure that all that was done. But sometimes it gets missed.
Yep.
Hey, Pip, you ever heard of this guy?
Who?
Pip.
Philip
Martinsky. He is a listener to our show, and I think he has something else going on in the podcasting world. In fact, I think he's the host of a plane safety podcast. He sent this in to us a while back, I guess when he was still down in Disney World. Hello from Disneyland, or is it Disney World? Well, after 2 weeks of space mountains, 7 dwarfs mine trains, and $50 burgers, I'm now officially broke. Before I start my new life as a hobo, I want to use my last few pennies to send this email in and correct Captain Nick, who I've heard several times say that China is the only remaining country in the world to measure altitude in meters. In fact, Russia still uses meters below transition level to measure height, QFE. However, this is slowly changing. There are some cities in Russia, St. Petersburg, for example, which have started using feet below transition level. I believe the plan is for the whole of Russia to convert to feet QNH by 2018 when they host the Football World Cup, aka soccer. But for the time being, though, you might get feet, meters, thumbs, barleycorns, willies, or apples. As they say in Russia with every landing clearance, good luck. Do they really?
Yep.
I've never flown in Russia, so I thought that can't be right.
Give it like the best Russian accent, just like good luck.
Good luck.
Every time you got handed over from one sector to another, which is very frequent in Russia, they used to say it as well. Not so much nowadays.
Anyway, clear skies, especially on the 21st PIP. And
I wish you'd sat on this just a little bit longer, because I think if you just waited a bit longer, then I would have probably been correct, Jeff.
Yeah, apparently they're changing over.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, so
you're just temporarily wrong.
So if you just edit this out and put it back in,
okay,
time in 2018.
If you give me a big enough contribution, Nick, I'll edit it out.
but Pip, of course, is right, and because he actually lands there occasionally, whereas I've only ever flown Russia, so he would know.
Yeah. Norbert. This might be something interesting to you, Steph. However, it would have been interesting to me as well, except that it's all sold out, unfortunately. He sent in an email with this. I may have already talked about it on the show, but it's the southernmost, the 5th runway run in Atlanta, a 5K, where you can either run or walk or jog or whatever you want to do. But he sent me notification of this, and then I went to the website and found out that it was already sold out. But he said, well, if you're up in the Toronto area at Toronto Pearson, I'm not sure if this is sold out yet or not, but the Toronto Pearson Runway Run 2017, and join us Saturday, September 23rd for the 10th annual Runway Run. Registration is now open and space is limited. So again, hopefully by the time you're hearing me
it looks like you can still register. The 5K individual run you can still register for. You can do the 5K as a team. You can register for that. I'm not sure if that's everyone runs the whole distance and it's added up points as a team, or if you do part of it, but you can do up to 10 people. So I'm assuming it's the former. There's a 2K individual that is sold out and a 2K team that is still available for registration.
Good.
And then adding on to that, I actually found out there's also a 5K run that's being held at, I believe, Chicago Midway Airport on September 17th. And sadly, I cannot attend either one of these. But yeah, I've done runway runs in the past. They're actually great because they're flat and they lend themselves to being rather fast. So it's a good time if you have a chance to do one. I highly recommend it, especially if you're an av geek and listening to the show, because you'll get to be up close and personal with some aircraft probably too while you're there. So not landing on the, not using the runway at the same time you're using the runway, but
just want to be sure that they're not doing that. Sounds kind of dangerous to me.
That's yeah, not
or as if you're flying though, do you get extra points if you hit a few runners?
10 points for that one.
10 points. Ding. There we go. In the text of this article on their website, you'll also be treated to incredible views and up-close encounters with the animals, equipment, and people who make Toronto Pearson a world-class airport, like
animals?
Liz, Piper, and Andy Furlong.
Animals?
Animals? Did I say animals?
It says animals.
Oh, it does. Yeah, wait, what does that mean?
I don't know.
I kind of just skipped right over that. I didn't even...
a little confused by that, but...
Yeah, what kind of animals are you going to have encounters with there?
Birds.
Birds, okay.
Birds.
Probably not crocodiles and alligators.
Probably not.
No.
That's the Florida.
Yeah, that's the Orlando runway run.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you, Norbert in Atlanta, for letting us know about that. Now, here is an interesting subject to talk about, I think. And I've combined two pieces of feedback because they were the kind of same thing. Cole and Volandis. I'll start with Cole because he sent his in first. Hello, all. My name is Cole. I've been listening to the podcast for a little over a year now. It's safe to say I have APG syndrome. Cue the music. Okay, so I guess I need to play that. Where is it? You know, you'd think by now I'd know exactly where that is. Here it is.
Doctor, give me the news. I got a vacation.
APG syndrome.
No pills gonna cure my ill. I got a vacation.
APG syndrome. And he says he's been listening to the podcast for a little over a year now. I've tried submitting feedback through the iOS app a couple of months ago with no luck, so I will try again. Sorry you had trouble there. I know a lot of people use it and get through. I'm a flight student at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. I'm a commercial pilot with an instrument rating, and I'll begin CFI training this fall semester. I was wondering when you guys started to feel comfortable and confident as a pilot, specifically while flying IFR. As I am instrument rated, I could never see myself flying solo in actual instrument conditions in the near future. I lack the confidence to push myself on these types of flights when flying without an instructor. I was wondering when you all started to feel comfortable flying in IMC, and if you had any recommendations as to how to build confidence with this sort of thing. Also, if you have any advice as I embark on my journey to become a CFI, it would be much appreciated. Thank you for all the time and effort you put into the show. You all have different and unique perspectives that make this podcast amazing. Thank you again, Cole. And I can give you an answer straight away, Cole. I've never felt comfortable flying an IMC. No, I'm just kidding. I think with everything, you know, the more you do something, the more you build your level of confidence. But I'm going to let Steph kind of put in her 2 cents worth.
No, I think you're exactly on the right track there. And my answer to your question is, first of all, if you're not confident, there's no pressure to actually go out and fly in instrument conditions, because it's not, at this point, you're not an airline pilot. You're not getting paid that type of money to do that. And if you're not confident with it, then you do need to go out and practice more, because practice does make perfect. And like Jeff said, the more you do something, the more confidence you will build with it. And we all have something, I think, or we all have things that cause us to have hangups or things that we're not particularly sure that we're doing well or correctly all the time. But I promise that the more you do it, the more confident you're going to become with it. And even though you may not recognize that in yourself initially or quickly, the people that you're flying with will be able to give you open and honest feedback on that. And the more you do it with them, after a while, I think you're just going to have someone there with you, and you'll be doing the majority of the work and be very confident in flying in IMC conditions. So I'd say it's just practice. It's just getting out there, being familiar with it. And, when there's something that you're confronted with that you're not confident in doing, it's not pushing yourself to do it alone, but it's pushing yourself to go out there in those conditions over and over and over again until it is something that you're comfortable with. And don't do it on your own until you're comfortable with it, because it's not worth it being out there being nervous or uncomfortable or having, more things going on that you can process for the situation. So, but it comes with time. It comes with time,
isn't it? Because you have to pay for this yourself. You're paying for hours doing something you don't particularly enjoy. You're not looking out the window, or you're under a bloody hood. So it's tough motivating yourself to go and do it.
It is, but I mean, we're all in this because we love flying, and this is one aspect of it, especially if you're on if you want to be on a career track to do it. But I think a lot of people are in similar situations to you, Cole, and I think most people, once they get a certain level of familiarity, and it just comes with repetition, and that's all it is. So you're going to get there with it. Absolutely.
No, I have to agree. Are there many GA simulators out there that you could use?
Yeah, it depends on where you are. The flight school I rent from has one of the Redbird simulators, and I actually have not used it, but you can certainly use it for maintaining instrument currency. So that might be a way to go to at least become more comfortable with flying in simulated instrument conditions. It's also, as Nick mentioned, this all costs money. The simulators are a fair bit less expensive than renting an actual aircraft or waiting for even the right weather conditions to be able to go out and fly in actual IMC. Although I will say there's nothing that substitutes for actual IMC. Simulated conditions in VFR flight are not the same. So no matter how much you try and make it the same.
No, I agree. But no, and it must be tough when you've go into the airport on a foul day and going, right, I'm going to get airborne in this and fly around in it and get more actual time.
And with anything else, you want to build gradually on basic skills. So I think it probably doesn't hurt to stay in the local area and just shoot approaches back to your local airport and start on days when perhaps the minimums or perhaps the ceilings are higher than actual minimums. You don't want to go out and shoot an approach to 200 feet every single time. You maybe want to have that be a little bit higher so you can build your confidence with flying in actual IMC and being able to fly the approach, but then have a comfortable margin where you can break out and see, and it's not that you're convincing yourself, but you'll be able to see that it actually works the way it's supposed to, and that will give you more confidence.
It's always a good feeling after flying an instrument approach, and then all of a sudden everything clears and you go, wow, there's a runway right there where it's supposed to be. Yay.
But it does take a lot of concentration. It is quite tiring after a while.
It can be very tiring, especially if you're flying an aircraft that does not have a good autopilot. And, if you're talking about single pilot operations in a single engine aircraft without an autopilot, that's actually very difficult work. It's much easier for me to take an airplane like the Cirrus that has a autopilot that works well, so I can actually pay more attention to the approach and know that the heading is set, know that my altitude is set, know that I'm where I'm supposed to be when I'm supposed to be there. It just takes a lot of the workload off in those situations. But it's also really good to have those single pilot skills. I mean, that's the foundation of it, but it is a lot of workload.
Yeah.
Steph, if you don't mind, why don't you continue with Volandis's...
Sure. So Volandis, is it Volandis or Volandis? I see it written.
I misspelled the one.
Oh, okay. It's Volandis.
It's Volandis, yeah.
He says, hello.
I was just trying to be economical with my vowels.
That's right. You're on a Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah. I didn't want to spend the extra $200.
Spend the extra $200 for another vowel.
Yeah.
Sorry, Volandis. He says, hello, how are you? I am writing to make some questions for this job as I might become a pilot. Firstly, how much stress and anxiety does this job have? Also, how many hours do you fly per day? Do you get anxious even in calm situations? Have you ever been scared of planes, but now you've overcome it? In which countries are there pilot colleges? What qualifications did you need to get in and out of the college? Also, how much time did you stay out of your home? What skills and personality should someone have who wants to be a pilot? And lastly, what are the negatives of this job? Have you regret becoming a pilot? Please write back, as I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you for reading this and have a nice day, Volandis.
Now, Volandis, we're hoping that you're watching the show or listening to the show so that we don't have to write you back. Because there's a good chance we will not write back. But thank you for writing in. And what skills and personality should someone have? I'd say awesome skills and fantastic, great personalities, as we all have here at the APG.
I'm lots of modesty.
Modesty,
yes.
Yeah.
Modest. What is that? Modesty.
Modesty. Yeah.
Yeah. So, just quickly for me, stress and anxiety. Yes, that is part of the equation, especially when you're doing this for a living and you're transporting hundreds of passengers from point A to point B. And usually that stress and anxiety is caused by weather, in my case anyway, or perhaps, mechanical problems, but that doesn't normally happen very often. So the number one thing for me is weather that provides that stress and anxiety. But because we've been doing this for quite some time, are able to regulate it and to control it so that it doesn't overwhelm us. And usually that stress and anxiety is short-lived. And what's the saying? Flying is hours and hours of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror. And that's actually pretty accurate. Most of the time you're flying this airplane and it's almost, should we say, boring, which is good in my opinion, in my book. But there are times when your adrenaline starts flowing a little bit more, your heart rate picks up because, you are enduring a higher level of stress for whatever reason. And that we as humans we have, that built into us to be able to, that's why our adrenaline starts picking up and the adrenaline level starts rising and our heart rate. I guess Steph can tell us all of the physiological things that happen to your body. Your blood, I think, starts pooling to your organs.
No,
boiling. Yeah, boiling. No, that was earlier at the Starbucks and
yes, that's anger.
and the parking garage.
Confusing my physiological functions there.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's your body's natural defenses and the way it copes with these things. And it's a good thing. But you don't want to have that 100% of the time because then you would pop and die. So I think that, and this is, the kind
of fact.
Yes, that's a physiological fact. You'll pop.
Pilots I keep seeing with popped heads.
You'll pop and die. So if you're that kind of person, I say don't be a pilot. But and it's funny because we talk about this a lot. The kind of jobs out there where people, maybe you're listening to this right now and you have one of these kind of jobs where the stress level and anxiety level is very, very low, but it's very constant and it's just and continuous. That is the kind of job that I could not do. I can tell you right now, I could not do that without, dying of cancer. Probably wouldn't have lived as long as I've already lived. But this job for me is relatively stress-free, and just occasionally I have these high peaks of stress and anxiety. But again, they don't last very long. And so after everything's over with, you're like, okay, that's in the past now. I'm not even going to think about it anymore. Let's think about what's ahead of us now. And that's just the way it is for me, and that's the kind of job that it works well with me and my personality. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you mentioned that stress and anxiety is a normal part of it, and it's there for a reason. It's to kind of heighten your sense and awareness of what's going on. But too much of that adrenaline, too much of those hormones circulating in your
will make you pop and die.
Will not make you pop and die generally. But, it can also be distracting because if you allow the emotional side of things to take over when you're feeling that way, that's where it can be very hard to manage the situation and cope with the stress and anxiety. But that's again where, we were talking about the just the amount of time and energy and experience that you put into knowing how to handle those situations. And then you can better recognize when the stress and anxiety starts to build a little bit, and you can take a step back and draw on experience to know how to deal with the situation. And the other reason it's there is because, if it's something that maybe you haven't really encountered before, or it's something that's exceptionally stressful. So, take the worst weather I've ever been in as a pilot, whatever that happens to be, that's going to be a stressful situation. But there's probably something to be learned from it, either how to avoid it, how to handle it, how to, get help if you need it. And those are the things that those stress hormones help you to remember how you handled it in the future so that you can build on that as part of your experience. So makes it a very memorable event.
I will say that, if you're somebody right now thinking about becoming a pilot and just the idea of flying an airplane gives you stress and anxiety, maybe this is not the right job for you. Just saying. I don't know. Unless you've given it a try. What do you think, Captain Nick?
I think if you're already concerned about it and you're questioning whether you ought to go and do it, perhaps you're right. I think becoming a pilot is something that most people dream of, and they enter with excitement and a little bit of apprehension, but generally speaking, they just can't wait to have a go, get in the air and start learning. And certainly when they've had their first few flights, that feelings are usually amplified enormously. So that what drives them to jump all the hurdles they need to make a career of it. When you ask what skills and personality someone should have, well, I would like to say there are no specific personality types that an airline pilot should have. Perhaps in the old days, they were looking for a stable extrovert or someone of that kin, but nowadays, I think that has been well debunked. And people of all personality types are quite capable of becoming good pilots. Your skill level depends to a certain extent on your ability to coordinate and for your brain to be able to cope with the learning processes that we go through to become a pilot. And that, I'm afraid, you'll only find out if you have a go. And if you find you've got the skill sets needed, then Bob's your uncle. Away you go, and good luck with that. And finally, he says, what are the negatives of becoming of the job? Have you ever regretted becoming a pilot? Well, I must admit, I find it hard to imagine now, but after 19 years of flying in the Royal Air Force, I was sitting in a hardened aircraft shelter during a pretend war, wearing a gas mask, sitting on a concrete floor, staring up at a jet. And I've been there for about 3 hours. I hadn't eaten for ages. And we're just waiting for some simulated air raid to finish. And I was thinking to myself, I think I've had enough of this job, which is why I moved on to civil aviation. It was a completely different environment and gave me a new outlook on life. So yes, it is possible to become stale, but I never regret becoming a pilot. I think at times you just want to change the type of work you do, or just move on to a different type or a different route structure, or just something just to keep things fresh. But no, I've never regretted becoming a pilot ever.
Neither have I. Excellent. Well, thank you, Cole and Valandis, for your queries regarding stress, anxiety, and confidence. Now, let's hear this week's installment of Plain Tales.
The old pilot's plain tales. But, sir, Harriers don't actually hover. A friend of mine, another captain from my airline, died well before his time from illness a couple of years ago. Like me, he flew in the military, but he served in the Navy as a Sea Harrier pilot. His obituary in one of our major broadsheets told a little of his life. During the conflict, he was described as an aggressive and most capable fighter pilot who had done very well indeed on active service in the battle for the Falklands. His greatest test came when he was patrolling on a mission at extreme range, when his ship, the Invincible, sometimes nicknamed by us the Invisible, ran into thick fog. Whilst the ship searched for clear air, Charlie made an approach, but he flew past the ship without being able to spot her in the thick fog. Running seriously short of fuel, he had one more chance. As he approached the ship at slow speed, he saw a faint, diffuse glimmer from the ship's searchlights. He flew along the top of the fog and hovered his Harrier beside the glow. With less than 60 seconds of fuel left, he lowered his aircraft into the murk, and at only 50 feet did the shape of the superstructure start to appear beside him out of the mist. The first anyone on the deck saw of Charlie was the red-hot glow of his aircraft's rear nozzles as he appeared from nowhere and settled safely on the deck. Asked if he was scared, Charlie replied that he was so busy, mentally and physically, that he didn't have time to be frightened. But as soon as he landed, he started to shake, a condition that continued until he was met in the crew room by Invincible's captain with a large whiskey. Charlie was awarded the Queen's Commendation for valuable service in the air. However, his bravery and skill were a mark of Harrier pilots around the world, as the aircraft was renowned for being a challenge to fly. It was in 1957 that the Bristol Engine Company proposed an engine design for a directed thrust turbojet that could meet NATO's specifications for a new light tactical support fighter. It was the Hawker Siddeley Aircraft Company that bought the components of the design together as the P1127 prototype, following the cancellation of a more advanced supersonic version on cost grounds. This aircraft was destined to fulfill Air Staff Requirement 345 for a vertical and short takeoff and landing, that is VSTOL, ground attack fighter. Sir Sidney Cam, Ralph Hooper, and Stanley Hooker of Bristol Engines were the men who combined to create the concept. Close cooperation between the airframe and engine companies was vital, as the engine's ability to direct its thrust was essential to the way the aircraft was to operate. Rather than using rotors or a direct thrust engine, the Bristol Pegasus engine was an innovative design that would eventually produce more than 21,000 pounds of thrust. Of the 6 prototypes built, half of them would crash, including one at the Paris Air Show, which was unceremoniously dumped on the specially prepared pad that the competitor Mirage V-Stol was to use later that day. There was no doubt the Harrier was a handful to fly, but from the P1127 came the Kestrel, named from a small hawk that hovers over its prey. The RAF put in an initial order for 60, which they named the Harrier GR1 after a small hawk that, strangely, is not renowned for its hovering ability. The Harrier was only one of several V-Stol fighter aircraft of its era, which included the Bell X-14, the Combat Pogo, the Mirage 8, the Entwicklung Sud, a consortium between Bolkow, Heinkel and Messerschmitt, VJ-101, the Rockwell Hummingbird, the VFW VAC-119B, and the Soviet Yak-38 Forger. Of all these, only the British Harrier and the Soviet Forger were to be put into production. Whilst the Forger needed an additional lift engine that was only used for takeoff and landing, the concept of the Harrier was considerably more elegant. The Harrier's 2 semicircular cheek air intakes fed a large volume of air into the twin-shaft Pegasus turbofan, which initially was compressed by the 3 low-pressure compressor stages, which fed air to a front pair of rotating steel nozzles. Air then continued to the core of the engine through 8 high-pressure compressors, the combustion chambers, the 2 high-pressure turbine stages, before exiting via the rear pair of rotating nozzles, this time made of mnemonic, a special heat-resistant nickel, chromium, titanium and aluminium alloy. Of interest, the 2 engine spools rotated in opposite directions to greatly reduce the gyroscopic forces that would otherwise hamper low-speed handling. The factor that limited engine thrust were the turbine blade temperatures, which were estimated through sensors in the jet pipe. In order to provide sufficient power for a vertical landing or for operations in hot high conditions, a 50-gallon distilled water tank above the turbine section provided water injection to the rear of the combustion chamber to keep the blade temperatures to an acceptable level. This limited maximum power for hovering to only 90 seconds. In forward flight, the Harrier was conventional in its control methods, but for vertical flight, the nozzles had to be progressively rotated from their rearward direction to point directly downwards, and engine power controlled to carry the weight of the aircraft as lift from the wings reduced. As the speed dropped, the effectiveness of the aerodynamic controls lessened, at which point the pilot relied on the reaction controls, thrusters mounted on the wingtips, nose and tail, which were fed with air bleed from the engine. Control of the thrusters was achieved through the stick and rudder pedals and worked in a similar sense to the cyclic controls of a helicopter. Out of interest, the nozzles were rotated with modified motorcycle chains. Vertical takeoffs weren't particularly common, as with a full fuel load, the amount of weapons that could be carried was limited. Much more common were short takeoffs, which started like a normal rolling takeoff with the nozzles full aft, but then at around 65 knots they were moved forward to a mid-position, so that the engine could help to both continue acceleration and lift the aircraft clear of the runway. During vertical takeoffs and landings, it was critical to keep the aircraft into wind, as it was possible for a side wind to overcome the power of the reaction thrusters. A small weather vane was mounted on the nose right in front of the windshield to help the pilot assess the wind direction. The RAF viewed the most vulnerable part of a fighting force as not so much the aircraft themselves, but the air bases they operated from. A few bomb craters in a runway could stop operations for several squadrons. The Harrier, however, could still fly from short, undamaged portions, or could even be deployed to small prepared clearings, helipads, roads, and the like. Its ability to be scattered to dozens of small operating pads near the front line was highly prized. With only a short transit to the battle area, it could get airborne and be on station very quickly, and return to refuel and rearm in an equally short time. It was this ability that also made it attractive to the US Marine Corps, who, despite opposition in government, acquired the aircraft in 1971. Called the Aviate-A, an initial order of 108 of them was placed, and then the Spanish and Thai governments bought the aircraft as well. More advanced versions were developed, which included the GR-3, the Sea Harrier for the Royal Navy, and the Marine Aviate-C. A second generation of the Harrier, the Aviate-B, was developed in the 1970s as a joint Anglo-American concept between McDonnell Douglas and British Aerospace. Due to rising costs, the UK withdrew in 1975, but the aircraft was completed and made its maiden flight in 1981. It went on to serve both the US and UK forces after Britain rejoined the programme. The upgrades were substantial, and it turned the aircraft into a night-capable radar-equipped fighter that had a very advanced cockpit, and it had a substantial performance increase over the first generation of Harrier. This version also served with the Italian and Spanish navies, as well as the USMC and the RAF. The Harrier was always a crowd pleaser. Its unique ability to transition from 580 knots into a vertical hover made it a big draw at air shows. Its potential to operate from small carriers and away from big air bases also made it a favorite with senior officers and strategic planners alike. However, the reality was often a little different. The support needed to operate from remote locations was substantial. Convoys of heavy lorries were required to move fuel, ammunition, bombs, and spares. The aircraft was labour-intensive, and an engine change, quite likely when away from neatly swept airfields and with a flying machine that was akin to a vast hoover that loved to suck up debris, required the entire wing to be lifted off the fuselage to gain access. When carrying weapons and a decent fuel load, its vertical takeoff capability could rarely be used, so a temporary takeoff strip was required, which in turn needed engineers and more heavy equipment. The dream of hiding a few aircraft on the side of a field under a few trees was just that, a dream. The pilots who flew the Harrier were generally accepted to be amongst the best. Those who graduated with the top marks were usually chosen to fly it. The aircraft was well known for killing the unwary, and it had a peacetime loss rate that was considerably higher than other types, so only those with the necessary skills were allowed into the cockpit. In the States, the Harrier was by far the most dangerous military aircraft they had. More than a third of the fleet were lost to accidents, a fact that its detractors often repeated. Of the Marine Harrier, Philip E. Coyle, the Pentagon's chief weapons tester from 1994 to 2001, said, "What makes this situation so difficult is that we just don't have that kind of battlefield record to support the accidental deaths." The statistics supported this view, as the Harrier's lifetime accident rate was twice that of the F-16, which was also single-engined, 3.5 times that of the F-18, which was another naval fighter, and 5 times that of the A-10, which had a similar role in ground attack. The British were much more accepting, despite their loss rate being even higher than the US forces. Part of this was due to the Harrier's enormous success during the Battle for the Falklands. The only British fighter able to operate so far from land was the Harrier, and it flew with great success from HMS Invincible and Hermes. 42 Harriers, a mix of Sea Harriers and RAF GR3s, were embarked, a small force when compared with the 122 serviceable jet fighters available to the Argentinian forces. It was the Sea Harrier that flew the vast majority of the sorties, nearly 1,500, and which also claimed the 20 kills, which included Flight Lieutenant Morgan's efforts when he shot down 4 aircraft on his own. Of note, however, the fabled VIF combat manoeuvre, vectoring in forward flight, that is often quoted by fans of the Harrier with more enthusiasm than knowledge, was never employed in actual combat. This manoeuvre involved the pilot shifting his nozzles from the aft position to the fully forward to allow a momentary increase of turn rate and sudden braking. The aftermath of a VIF placed the aircraft in such a low speed and vulnerable position, it was only really considered as a possible last-ditch manoeuvre. The RAF's GR3s played a vital role during the ground war, performing close air support missions by attacking Argentinian positions, suppressing enemy artillery and the like. During the war it flew the equivalent of 6 sorties per day per aircraft. The Harrier had played such an important role in protecting the naval fleet from repeated attack by enemy Mirage and Skyhawk fighters that it truly won a place in the heart of the British people. The American experience with the Harrier has been less favourable, but it has never been in a conflict when only the Harrier was capable of operating. With so many options available to the American forces, the Harrier has only been there to complement other aircraft, and sometimes its vulnerability has shown. A single-engined aircraft will always be more easily brought down, and particularly when its heat source is near the centre of the fuselage, a missile hit will always be more effective. Add that to the Harrier's role of supporting troops close to the ground, and you get the sort of loss rate that occurred during the First Gulf War in 1991. The Harrier's attrition rate was 1.5 aircraft for every 1,000 sorties flown, compared with 0.5 for the A-10 in a similar role, and 0.2 for the single-engined F-16 and 0 for the F-18. The Harrier's airframe was packed with vital systems, and a hit almost anywhere would often fatally damage the aircraft. 5 of the 7 Harriers that took enemy fire were destroyed. The Marines, however, point to the Gulf War as the Harrier's proving ground. The Corps Commandant, Alfred Gray, Jr., told the Senate Armed Services Committee that its support for the AV-8B had paid off in spades, and the commander of the U.S. forces in the Gulf, General Schwarzkopf, cited the Harrier as one of several weapons that gave standout performances. So the Harrier certainly had its fans, one of which was Sir Thomas Sopwith, the famous World War I aircraft builder, who, late in his life, said, "I still don't believe the Harrier. Think of the millions that have been spent on vertical takeoff in America and Russia, and quite a bit in Europe, and yet the only vertical takeoff aircraft which you can call a success is the Harrier. When I saw the Harrier hovering and flying backwards under control, I reckoned I'd seen everything."
Another smashingly good Plain Tales. And speaking of Harrier, I've noticed your face, Captain Nick.
Harrier
is quite hairier than it was last week.
Not just a clever Plain Tales title then. Huh?
Oh, God. At least it's not hovering. No, it's just slowly coming back. Slowly coming back. I love the fact that Sopwith, the man who built, the designer built the Sopwith Camel and all those lovely World War I airplanes, was still alive when the Harrier started flying. I find that amazing. Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah, that is amazing.
Yeah, what a life he lived, from designing those amazing World War I airplanes to seeing an aircraft like that.
So I understand that the Harrier was quite challenging to pilot.
Well, it did kill an awful lot of guys. I mean, seriously, the accident rate was pretty horrendous, both in the American forces and the RAF. An awful lot of accidents, and mainly its peacetime loss rate was the bit that used to make people's eyes water. You know, so we used to see so many accident reports from it. The Americans lost a third of all the aircraft they bought. That was a considerable number of airframes, which is why it was questioned as to whether it had been a suitable airplane for them. But the Marines seemed to like it. So,
yeah, we when I was in the Air Force in the early mid '80s, there was some kind of a tropical storm / hurricane somewhere threatening airplanes that were stationed near the water wherever the hurricane was coming in. And there was a Harrier pilot that brought his Harrier into Columbus Air Force Base, Mississippi, to seek, shelter from the storm. And it was there for a while, and I was able to talk to the pilot of the machine, because at that time I was working for Wing Safety, and we were stationed in the base operations building where, people coming in to visit a base would park their airplane nearby and do all the flight planning, fuel planning, and that kind of thing. And he was talking about Chuck Yeager, and he said that normally this airplane is very, very difficult to learn to fly, especially in the hovering mode. Or, well, I apologize. I guess it doesn't hover based on your Plain Tales title. But in that mode where it's not moving very quickly in a lateral fashion or forward and backwards fashion. And he said that Chuck Yeager came to fly one of their 2-seat models, and he got in and almost immediately was able to, fly the airplane without an issue at all. I mean, he said that just showed you what talent that guy had. He said he wasn't
gifted,
was very, very gifted. I guess he wasn't a very socially gifted person, or isn't. I guess he's still with us. But because there are several things that he has said and quoted as saying that most people kind of go, huh? What? Did you really say that? But apparently his pilot skills are just amazing.
Oh, sure. I mean, the loss rate has to be compared with the fact that most air forces that operated only allowed their highestly or best qualified students to learn to fly it, and they basically were the cream of the crop, the Harrier pilots. Yet still they had a very high loss rate. The hardest thing actually was not hovering it, and the title was really more about the bird it was named after. Hawker Siddeley named it after a bird called the falcon, which does hover. The Harrier, the hen Harrier and the marsh Harrier that we have in the UK, the bird that the Air Force named it after, doesn't hover at all. So I always thought it was poorly named. That was I don't know who came up with that one, but he obviously didn't know much about his nature or the nature of birds. But no, the aircraft did hover very well. In fact, it wasn't the hovering bit that was generally the problem. So long as you had it into wind, that was quite easy. It was actually the landing at full speed. If you couldn't move the nozzles, for example, and you had to do a completely conventional landing, apparently that was a bit of a nightmare. I mean, the approach speed was over 160 knots, and the aircraft was initially very tail heavy, and then you had to get it to sit on the main wheel, and it had a tendency, having been tail heavy, then to rotate forward and hit the nose wheel first as you slowed to land. And it just really was apparently quite a handful putting it down at full speed. So that was a difficult bit. It very rarely took off vertically. It just didn't have the performance to do that once it was hung with full fuel and full weapons. They invariably did a stall takeoff. So the one I described, or as they did on the ships, they built those ramps to help launch them into the air, which worked quite well.
Very cool. Excellent job again. Thank you, sir, for doing that for us.
Oh, thank you, sir.
More audio feedback.
Hello, crew. Hello, community. It's Paul over in the UK. I'm not in the industry and I don't fly privately, so I do an awful lot more listening than I could ever do useful talking. However, this is one of those times when I can add something to the debate, although it is a bit dubious if I'm being honest. Captain Nick was recently talking about units in his plain tales and the various units and standardisation and some of the obscure units in use in the industry. And in passing, he mentioned a unit called a barleycorn, which is a third of an inch. And I just wondered if he knew that unit is actually in regular daily use in both the US and the UK, as it is the difference between one shoe size and the next size up. So yeah, it dates back to 1300s and is still in regular use today, although not many people would ever call it a barleycorn. They just use that unit. And then secondly, I was recently on a holiday forum where somebody was talking about travelling from the US to the UK on an Acme Red overnight flight on New Year's Eve, and they were asking, would the pilots announce anything, or where would they announce anything? Would they celebrate it, etc.? So I thought that ties in, and I know just the man to ask. So yeah, Nick, what would you do on an overnight flight on New Year? Would you do anything, or would you just ignore it? And then finally, there's another podcast I'd like to point people in the direction of. Just a single episode of a podcast called The Eye of the Storm from the BBC. I'll stick the link in the email to Captain Jeff, then he can put it in the show notes if he likes. And what they do there is they take some person who is a normal everyday person suddenly thrust into the public spotlight, and then basically after the event, after it's all over, they sit them down and say, what was that like? And this particular episode is Captain Sullenberger. So obviously that is of interest to listeners of this podcast, so I just thought I'd mention that as well. So yeah, thanks for everything. It's a delight to listen every week. Talons, Douglas.
Paul, it's a delight to hear from people like you, especially audio feedback. Thanks for taking the time to send that in.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just quickly mention that he talked about Captain Sully interview from this podcast on the BBC.com. And he said when he sent this on, what day was this? The 18th.
August 18th.
It was available for 23 days. So I guess we have to subtract.
I don't know. I wonder if
11.
it's available here in the U.S. or
I don't know. I
parts of the
didn't
world.
try it.
I didn't try it either, but nonetheless.
Yeah.
I'm assuming link will be in the show notes. Yeah.
Yep. I'll put that in the show notes. And so you're traveling in flight, and it's New Year's Eve. Nick, what do you do?
He's going to have a toast of champagne.
Yes.
Exactly right.
You can hear the cork popping.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's not like we're on an exciting holiday flight. Usually it's we carry a lot of business people who are just trying to get from A to B, and they're perhaps not too interested in finding out exactly. It is possible, of course, to celebrate, more than one New Year, because although going from New York to London, that doesn't work. You've just got to work out where the one. If you're coming the other way, you can usually have more than one, because, of course, America is a little bit behind the UK. So you can have you can celebrate the UK one, you could celebrate the one over the ground you're at, and you could celebrate the New York one if the timing's right for your flight. You can calculate what the local time is. It's every 15 degrees you've traveled across the Earth surface, your clock should move 1 hour. Of course, if you're over land, you have to look down at the local time that they've decided for that country and decide what that is. Do I actually declare it? I kind of take the feel from the way the passengers are behaving. So I asked the cabin crew, have we got is everyone awake? Are people, looking forward to it? Are they looking at their watches to try and work it out? And if that's the case, if I get the feeling that the majority of the aircraft would like to celebrate, then yes, of course, I'll make a PA and work out a suitable time for either usually where we are. So as we go through midnight local time, halfway through the flight, I'll do it, make a PA and a countdown and that sort of thing. And the girls will run around with a little spot of champagne for everyone. But generally speaking, in my experience, most of the flights I've been on, everyone's fast asleep. They're really not too worried about it. So we might make a little fuss of it at the beginning of the flight. But by that time, once everyone puts their heads down, gets a bit quiet, then it's not really worth waking them all up.
I will say one of the neatest flights I took, just from a holiday standpoint, I flew from Charlotte to Dublin. I think it was 2012, but it was on July 4th. And I think actually the 4th was the next day, but most of the towns and cities were doing their fireworks that evening because of whatever day of the week it was. I forget, must have been a weekend before the start of the work week, but it was a nice clear night. And as we were flying basically up just off of the coast of the US, of the Eastern United States, you could see all of the different fireworks displays. And that was really neat. So no one ever pointed it out from the flight deck or anything else, but
they were
sleeping. Who was yeah, they were sleeping. For anyone who was awake and watching, it was kind of a neat way to view fireworks. So.
Have you ever been airborne for New Year's Eve, Jeff?
I don't think so. And this always reminds me of when you talk about fireworks from the air, it always reminds me when I was flying up to Toronto years ago at night. And it was before the 4th of July. And all of a sudden, I'm looking all over the place at all these fireworks going off. And apparently, what is it? The 1st of July is Canada Day. Is that right? We have
yes,
some
it
Canadians.
Is. My son was born on Canada's Day.
Okay. So, but we're going like, what? What's going on? It's not the 4th of July. And then finally somebody said, it's, Canada Day or whatever. And I went, oh, that makes sense. So apparently they celebrate in a very similar manner. But it was very pretty to see all those displays from above, lighting up the ground. And I can't wait to next time I go to get a pair of shoes to say, I think I need one barleycorn bigger for this one right here.
I don't think the U.S. uses that measurement. It's just yeah.
Okay.
But I mean,
they'll just look at me like, huh? What?
I think you should do it anyway. But.
I'll do it anyway. Just to see how.
I'm guessing he means that when we buy a 45 or something in the UK, that's 45 barleycorns, i.e. 45 1/3 of an inch, which would be your size.
15 inches? That'd be a big shoe.
Yeah, but
wow,
big feet.
Yeah,
what they say about people with big feet.
No. Let's see.
Stay away from
they say a lot of things, that's for sure.
Yeah, big feet, big hands.
Paul, thank you very much for the audio feedback again. And we continue on with Dave alerting us to something. It says, just wanted to let everyone know on Saturday, September 9th, is the 2017 Newark, New Jersey Airline Show held at the Ramada Plaza, Newark Liberty Airport on Frontage Road in Newark. $10 admission. Children under 12 get in free. Open from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Also, there's a store called the Airplane Shop in, let's see, Stewart Place, Fairfield, New Jersey.
That's not fair, Jeff. I'm landing in Newark on the 9th. And they'll have closed. When I get in, I don't land till about 7, so I won't be able to go there.
Oh, well. The Airline Shop is open on, that's the 8th and 9th. Maybe they're closed on the 10th.
Yeah, so I'm not going to be able to buy some more Airbus models.
Well, Dave, thanks for letting everybody know. Unfortunately, Nick can't take advantage of it. But he also wrote in saying, well, if you can't make this one on the 9th of September, there's the Los Angeles Airliners and Transportation Expo on the 16th of September. The SFO Airline Memorabilia Show on the 30th of September. And Toronto Airline Collectible Show in October 1st. Atlanta Airline Collectible Show, Saturday, October 7th.
I bet people that collect airlines I don't quite understand these.
Yeah, well, you have to have a lot of money to do it, but yeah.
Okay.
Minneapolis Airline Collectible Show and Get Together October 14th. He's got a long list of these things. So I'll put all these in the show notes so you can see if you're in any of the aforementioned places. And Houston, of course, I'm not sure if that one's going to go off without a hitch. I'm not sure. By November, hopefully they'll have everything recovered there. Chicagoland, Frankfurt, and that's Frankfurt, Germany, and Heathrow Aircraft Enthusiasts Fair on November 26th. So
that one I could go to probably.
Yeah. So thank you, Dave, from New Jersey. We'll put all that information in the show notes for folks to check out. Ian also wrote in to tell us that he went to the Edmonton Air Show this past weekend. I think he sent this on the 20th. So whatever weekend that was, about a week and a half ago. And he took some photography, or he took some pictures, and he sent us a link to iangriffinphotography.com. And I'll put that link in the show notes as well, so you can check out all the fine photographs that he snapped or took while he was there at the Edmonton Air Show.
Really nice photos, by the way, Ian.
Yeah.
Looking through them right now.
Very nice. Yep. Very talented. While we're kind of in this vein, I don't know why it reminded me of this, but Ivan sent in this. His feedback is, we talk about the Mad Dog, the airplane that Dana and I fly, and the Boeing 717, aka MD-95, is also referred to as an angry puppy. And he sent in a photograph of an angry puppy taking runway 26 at Kilo Charlie Mike Alpha. That's Camarillo, California. You have to look at this photo. It's an amazing photograph of an angry puppy. Although the puppy doesn't look angry.
He doesn't look too angry.
No, it's a little puppy.
He looks pretty cute
on a runway.
Has anyone ever really seen an angry puppy? Do puppies get angry?
I've never seen an angry puppy.
No.
Yeah.
They only pretend angry, and they ain't nash with those nasty pointy teeth.
Okay. Sorry, didn't mean to skip around, folks. Mark in Ottawa writes, "Hello, Captain Jeff and crew. Two things. First, and most exciting for me, I passed my private pilot test yesterday." Come on.
Yay!
Button.
Yay!
Yay.
Good job, Golden.
It took just over a year from start to finish and was one of the most...
long test.
Yeah, it was a long
very
test.
Enthusiastic.
Wow.
A year.
I guess the Canadians, they don't fool around. Anyway, it took just over a year from start to finish and was one of the most difficult things I've tackled in years, but also one of the most worthwhile. I came out of the flight test with a license, but also the examiner's comments that I was a safe pilot, which of course is the ultimate goal. I'm already old, no need to be bold. I'm told it rarely ends well for pilots when they're mixed. That is true. I was listening to episode 285 and the interesting discussion about Air Canada and the loss of data from the flight recorders from the San Francisco event. The editorial you read lamented that Air Canada and or the FAA did not voluntarily pull the jet from service or preserve the flight recorder data after the incident. They called it a, quote, bureaucratic cover-up. However, as you pointed out, there was no need to preserve anything because there was no accident according to the regulations as currently written. Companies operate according to the laws or regulations they're subject to. Here's an example that happens every day. In the banking industry, some documents must be kept specific periods of time, some for 7 years. On 7 years plus 1 day, expired documents are shredded, digitally if they are electronic, because with the expiration of the legal obligation to keep the document, it has suddenly become a legal liability for the bank. If they're sued, they would be required to turn over any document they have, expired or not. This is the exact same scenario, data retention according to regulation, that happened with Air Canada. I'm not saying it's a good thing, I'm just suggesting that instead of blaming the company for not exceeding what the regulations say they have to do, the regulation should be changed. And again, that's Mark from Ottawa. Good point made, sir. And again, congratulations on getting your private pilot license.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Oh, and Mark, it was an episode or two back. He wrote in and said that he was an APG sufferer, or APG syndrome sufferer, and he APG sufferer's book Row 30 on the Mad Dog. And I said, that's kind of crazy. But he said, well, this is why. Listen to that sound of the Pratt & Whitney. Nice. So, actually, this is a video that he took, and he showed us the vantage point from sitting at row 30. And actually, I understand now, Mark. You're right. It's a great place to be on the jet if you enjoy that engine noise. And because you're just forward of the nacelle of the in this case it was on the right hand side of the aircraft, and you have a beautiful, you're behind the trailing edge of the wing, so you get to see the wing and the flaps and the slats and the spoilers and all that kind of stuff, all the action out there on the wing, and also the engine. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
But did he also have his app that measures the decibel level while he's sitting right there?
Huh?
Included in the video? Yes.
No, no, he didn't. That would have been interesting to see exactly what the decibel level was.
I guess it means you don't have to talk to your annoying fellow passengers.
Perfect. Book me in that seat every time.
It's just one of those days for Steph. Yes, that's the one I want.
Yes.
It's funny. Sometimes, you do everything you can to indicate that you have no desire to talk to anybody. You put your headphones on or all,
You're reading or just like.
Yeah, people are still trying to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you.
You fold your arms like this, like very closed posture, and the person next to you is still like, so do you live here? Are you on vacation? Where are you going? My name is such and such. I have grandchildren. Would you like to see all the photos I have of?
Oh, yes, I'd love to.
Yay.
Oh, boy.
I love people, by the way. I like talking.
We all do.
Perfectly
Yes,
random strangers seated next to me on aircraft for 5 hours at a time. Yes.
So, G-Man writes in. Apparently, I butchered his name. It's Glaucus. And I said Glaucus. I have no idea how that's actually pronounced.
That's what I would have said. So,
but he said at the end of this, I love the way you tried to pronounce my name, Captain Jeff, but to make things simple, just call me G. In another email he sent, he said, G-Man. I have more versions of my name that I can remember, so I'll save you the effort of creating another one. So apparently G-Man. I didn't get it quite
we
right.
like audio feedback of people telling us how to pronounce their name.
You're right, we do.
Yeah, good point.
Mm-hmm.
And he's from Sydney, Australia. So, wait, Glaucus. No, I can't do an Australian accent. I have no idea how to do that.
Just offended every Australian that listens. No,
yeah, I'm sorry. Well, I am offensive. Hope you are well, all well, and keeping busy. I would like to send you some feedback about a flight I recently took from Sydney to SCL.
Santiago?
Oh, thank you. I probably, yeah.
I have to look.
It's got to be a long flight because he was on a Qantas 747-400.
Yeah, I think it's Santiago.
Okay. This is one of the remaining 6 of their fleet, which will be phased out within the next 2 years. It's rather a sad feeling given the fact that Qantas, or QF, I guess that's Qantas, has flown 747s almost from their release and have a remarkable history with them. I know that Captain Nick is very vocal about how old the 747 is, but on this trip I had the opportunity to walk around the cabin, chat to the crew and some of the pilots, which were 4 in total, and though despite having flown 747s for most of my life, it gave me a sense of nostalgia. This amazing machine was a pioneer of wide-body flying. It has designed, and its design opened doors to a market that was rather restricted. And it flies until today, which other aircraft had the same longevity. Allied to the spotless maintenance QF is well known for, and so proud of, the aircraft passes a sense of surety and safety despite its age. This particular one was deployed in 2000. It reminded me of my early days when I used to go out with my grandpa for a car ride. Granted, he wasn't the best driver in the world and his car wasn't the latest model, but I always felt safe and enjoyed every minute of each of our journeys, always coming back safe and sound with a smile on my face. probably next time I take the same route, it'll be on a 787 or an A330, which is a reasonable plane, especially on QF's excellent business class seats. But I'm a Boeing guy, which will somehow make me feel sad and miss the Queen of the Skies, taking me across the Pacific on an effortless and pleasant journey. We are very lucky to live at a time we managed to we are very lucky to live at a time we managed to witness the evolution of air travel, see it becoming a way of mass transportation, and watch the marvels it achieves in terms of technology enhancements every day. We should always look ahead, but we should never forget where we came from, and the 747 is the link between old and new in the aviation world. Long live the Queen, at least in our fond memories. Blue skies, tailwinds, and God bless. G-Man. Very nice. He's definitely a proponent of Boeing and the beautiful 747.
Mm-hmm. He did at least admit that the A330 is a reasonable.
It's a reasonable airplane, don't you think, Captain Nick?
It's a high compliment for Airbus.
I can just see. It looks like Nick is. He's got his mouth closed. I think he's biting his lip.
He wrote a very nice piece. It'd be a shame for me to break.
A lot of restraint going on there. Thank you. Well, we'll move on then before Nick changes his mind. Phil says, "Hi, APG crew. I start IOE at my first Part 121 job in a couple of weeks." Again, that requires some applause. Here we go. Yay! Way to go, Phil.
IOE?
Initial operating experience. Yeah, thank you. I should define that for people. In other words, it's like you've completed training and now you're going to actually go out there and fly on the airplane with people, passengers, with a line check airman. And you're going to do that for at least one, usually 2 trips, 2 maybe 3-day trips, something like that. I'll be flying out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, mostly to quieter Midwestern cities, although I will be doing several ATL trips. My question is mainly targeted towards Captain Jeff and First Officer Dana. Do you have any tips for flying into Hartsfield? I want to avoid seeming too inexperienced on the arrivals, radios, etc. Tips, and Captain Nick can answer this as well because you fly into the ATL occasionally. I don't know.
It's terrifying.
It's just, it's one of those places where you go and you just do whatever they tell you to do. That's pretty much it. There's not a lot of thinking outside of the box there. It's not like you go, you know what? I'm thinking my distance from the runway right now, I'm going to go ahead and just slow down to 210 knots or 180 knots. You don't, no. You don't have, I can always tell I'm with somebody new and they start pulling the power back and setting in a new speed. And I'm going, did they tell us to slow down to 180? No. Oh, well, then don't do that. Trust me, you don't do that. You don't do that on your own. They'll start yelling at us if you do that. So yeah, just don't do any of that kind of stuff. If you're going into a small Midwestern airport and you're the only one out there in the pattern, knock yourself silly with doing all that pilot stuff. But in Atlanta, just
you just get to play a pilot here. You do.
Yeah, exactly.
My advice would be brief at least 4 runways and be confident that you won't land on any of them.
Now you only need to brief 3 because that's usually the maximum number that we use for landing. But I guess it wouldn't hurt to brief 4 or 5. Why not? Just go for all of them.
Yeah, that's true.
And you've got it covered. Yeah, because he's right. It's one of the arrival procedures we have now. In the notes, it'll say if you're landing to the west and you're using this arrival, expect that this is the runway you're going to be assigned. But there's no guarantee that it's going to be the runway you get. So it does help to brief at least 2 of the possibilities of the runways. But yeah, that's a good point.
I've not flown myself into Atlanta Hartsfield, but just looking at the sheer number of different frequencies once you're even on the ground is, I mean, that alone is terrifying. It's like, whoa, okay, so you gotta really be paying attention to where you're going and who you're talking to, and but it's just preparation, and it's no different than anything else. Just do what they ask you to do, and you can always ask for clarification.
Yeah, yes. And Dixie is a taxiway, not a way of whistling.
Yeah, and that's I still scratch my head on that, and I've been doing this for more than 28 years in and out of Atlanta, and we're the only airport in the world that calls taxiway Delta taxiway Dixie. And somebody explained to me, well, because we don't want people to be confused that they're talking to a Delta flight. And I'm thinking, well, then why don't they change the name of all these D taxiways everywhere else we fly so we don't get confused?
Or
we're never confused when they say taxiway Delta.
Pick a different letter of the alphabet.
I know,
Give it 2 letters of the alphabet, like another. Like just get rid of the whole Dixie nonsense and
yeah. Well, you know what? Totally now with all the statues and everything else going, I'm sure that I'm pretty sure that Dixie's probably going to be gone soon as well. So
probably.
Anyway, Steph makes a very good point. Just familiarize yourself with all the different frequency changes you're going to do. You know, as soon as you go off the runway, well, you know, in a controlled way. And they tell you to contact ground control.
Screaming, careening into the ground.
If you're just going off the runway and you didn't intend to, then you have other things to worry about. But so when you're switching over to ground control, there's a north and south ground control frequency, and then know which ramp you're going to. Don't tell them what gate you're going to. Tell them which ramp, and then make sure you have that ramp frequency up in your other radio. And when you make the transmission, we're at 2 south or 3 south for gate, whatever it is. Make sure that you transmit on the ramp frequency and not guard. A lot of people tend to use guard frequency.
Really?
Yeah, because they forgot to flip the switch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also when you're calling for pushback, they want you to say your gate number and what your departure is, and that way they know which runway you're going to be going to and which way to push back. And yeah, that's all I can think of right off the top of my head. Preparation is important.
What's he going to be flying, do you think?
He said it's a 121, but a small airplane, so an CRJ.
CRJ, he says, yeah.
All right, we have a number of wingspan restrictions. So
oh yeah, you don't have to worry about that with those.
You won't have to worry about those. We do. But
yeah, the big boys, they need to worry about wingspan limitations, various taxiways and routes you can't take. But and there are speed limitations also for the wingspans greater than 115 feet or whatever.
Yeah, because the faster you go, the bigger your wings.
Exactly, because they'll start stretching in the air.
If you exceed 15 knots, they get bigger. Apparently, I don't understand that myself.
Yeah, it's physics in Atlanta. You just don't ask why, just do it. That's actually the best advice. Don't ask why, just do it.
Yeah, I've learned that. It's taken me 22 years, but I've learned that.
Yeah, you just adopted my blissful ignorance philosophy, Nick. You're much happier.
Yeah, I'm going that way fast.
How many days until retirement? How many days until retirement?
Not that you're counting. 700 and some odd days, I think.
740 today.
740.
Yeah.
I remember.
Well done.
Good. Very well done. Fitzjames writes in and says, "Hey, APG crew, it's been forever since I've sent in feedback, but I wanted to answer the question that Jonathan asked in episode 286 about Kilo Tango Alpha Papa large airliners. He means Tampa, right? TBA. Okay, that was a little dyslexia on his part. Lufthansa still flies an Airbus A340-300 regularly to Tampa. I've included a picture I took of one in March 2016 at Fitz the Spotter, and a link to my same photo being used in the Kilo Tango Papa Alpha Wikipedia page. Oh, neat. On the Wikipedia page for Tampa International is a photo that Fitzjames took. That's cool. And we'll put that link in the show notes. Thank you for the awesome show, guys. And then we have a picture there of that. It's not a bad looking airplane. I think the 600 definitely is better looking. It's longer and has the engines are bigger, so it looks more in proportion. But it's not a bad photo of that.
It's got a 707 look-alike, really, and it doesn't have that boom on the top of the fin that the 70 had, which I always thought was a pitot probe, and turns out it's an HF aerial.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Learn something every day, right?
You do.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Fitzjames, and we'll good to hear from you again, and we'll put all those links in the show notes. And we mentioned PR as one of the coffee fund cadre members. He gave us a nice coffee fund contribution. And you don't have to give us a contribution to get your feedback played on this show, but it doesn't hurt, that's for sure. No, I'm just kidding. Dear Captains Nick, Jeff, Dana, and Steph, I'm a 46-year-old management professional who was selected for the Air Force in 1991, but couldn't join due to a family bereavement. I became a private pilot when I moved to the U.S. in 1999 and owned a little Cessna 150 for many years. I now live back in my home country, India, where I haven't been able to fly because hobby flying is rare. My dad was an Air Force fighter pilot and experimental test pilot trained at the RAF's ETPS in 1962. What does that stand for, Nick?
Empire Test Pilot School.
Oh, who rose to Air Marshal and Vice Chief. So you can imagine flying has been a lifelong passion and a frequent topic at the dinner table. Motivated by you folks to get to the other side of the cockpit door, I've quit my job, and next week I'm flying to Napa, California to complete my instrument multi and commercial ratings. I hope to return to India and apply for whatever sort of flying job I get. Wish me luck. Better to have tried and failed than to have not made the attempt at all. Cheerio. That deserves, again,
good luck,
applause.
Seriously, good luck. And I couldn't agree more with that statement. Try and fail, then not try at all.
I'm just amazed at how many people we have writing to us that say, you know what? Gosh darn it, I want to do what you guys do, and so I'm just going to drop everything that I'm doing so far and just, I mean, that takes so much courage and passion and guts. And I'm always amazed to see how many people do that or are willing to make that gamble. And I'm glad to see it. It makes me smile.
Yeah. No exaggeration
Absolutely.
here. People who follow their dreams are some of my personal heroes. So, because I think the world needs more people like that. So.
And
well,
love.
At 46, he's still got 19 years left before he would need to retire. It would be quite a reasonable career.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's as long as I was in the Air Force. So, yeah, well, good luck with that. I hope it goes well for you.
And India, I think, is one of those places where, you know, being a fully qualified pilot is a good thing, that you shouldn't have any trouble at all finding employment there.
No, there are an awful lot of low-cost carriers and airlines popping up in there, so I expect you'll be well in demand.
Yes. So PR, Guns, his nickname, please keep us apprised as to your progress in this journey, because it's going to be inspirational for everyone listening.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's awesome. And finally in my folder here, I'm going to go ahead and do this with Brian. I should rephrase that. I'm going to read Brian's feedback.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, AGP crew. My name is Brian, and I've been listening for well over a year now. Not sure how many old episodes I've gone back through, but it's a lot. Even some carpool buddies got subjected to the APG virus, but they didn't develop the syndrome. Weird. Anyway, started listening to your show as a way to get an idea of what actual airline pilot life is like, and if it would suit me or not. I've always loved aviation, but have been hesitant to dive in because a lot of pilots' personalities seemed a bit robotic. I don't know what you're talking about.
Neither do I.
Let's move on to the next piece of feedback.
Warning, Professor Robinson, warning.
Warning. Your show has obliterated that misconception for me, and I've started on my PPL 23 hours as of 8/29/17. So thank you for your work. Now, you'll notice today is the 29th, so he sent this in today. Wow. Shocking.
Are we nearly caught up or what?
Well, you know, so I kind of picked here and there, but almost. Anyway, so thank you for your work. Anyway, I have a couple of questions. First, I've noticed that crews call positive rate just before they put the landing gear up. I'm wondering why they use that rate, vertical speed, I'm assuming, instead of a given altitude, say pattern altitude or 500 feet or something. Secondly, I'm wondering about aircraft power plants. In the automotive world, a steep hill or a heavy trailer or a snow plow are all things that make the engine work harder to achieve a given speed. Sometimes we refer to this situation as lugging or bogging down. Is there anything equivalent for an aircraft? I know you can change the pitch on a variable pitch propeller, but that's all I can think of. The weight of the airplane and the rate of climb shouldn't make a difference, should they? Anyway, thanks for a great show. I learn a lot and enjoy it. I wish I could get an FAR AIM written by you guys. Yeah, don't hold your breath there.
51% accurate. So.
Yes. But half the stuff here is probably right. Probably not. Right now, I'm following your Java Jive instructions to use my money for flying lessons. But once I'm done with my PPL. You can expect to see me in the cadre. Thanks again, Brian. Thanks again, Brian. Yeah. Awesome. That's, again, some inspirational feedback. And so what do you say there, Captain Nick, regarding why is it that you guys don't say positive rate. You say something like positive climb?
No, we say positive rate.
Okay, because I've noticed, I've seen some videos on YouTube of some other foreign carriers that say, they don't say positive rate, but that's what we say here in the U.S. They say something different. But it's the same thing. And why do we do that?
Well, we need to make sure that we're actually moving away from the ground so it's safe to lift the gear. We don't want to wait too long because it's a lot of drag on the airplane. And if we lose an engine, we want to get rid of that drag. We don't want it there. So we just need to confirm that the airplane's going up. And I'm assuming your system is the same as our Jeff. Once we get indications on 2 instruments that the aircraft is climbing, then you can call positive rate. So for us, for me, I look at the radar and the rate of climb and descent, and which is right beside the altimeter. So actually, honestly, I'm looking at the pressure altimeter and the radar as well to make sure they're both showing the aircraft climbing, and then I make the call.
Yeah, you can't rely completely on the VSI, the vertical speed indication, because a lot of times, even though some of these things say instantaneous, they're not.
There's a lag.
Yeah, there's a lag.
Well, yeah, ours is really a sort of it's more
trend.
It's not a pure pressure instrument. So it being instantaneous, it works off the inertials. So it is pretty much an indication that you're moving away. You're not likely to be lured by it.
Ours, we have to rely upon the barometric altimeter to see actual climb on the barometric altimeter.
Cool.
But we're also looking at the VVI as well, or the VSI, and yeah, it's good to have at least 2, maybe 3 different indications that you were even looking outside. You can usually tell when you're looking outside that you're actually climbing away from the ground. But as you said, it's very important to get that drag reduced as quickly as you can, but you don't want to do it before you're climbing because then you could be back on the ground again.
Absolutely. That's
not a good thing.
Yep.
And now this one about bogging down or lugging aircraft power plants. I don't know if that directly relates to an engine that is directly applying its torque or power against something physical, or that has a lot of friction, like the ground or water. I guess air has a lot less friction. I don't know.
But still, maybe I'm not quite understanding the question that he's asking here. He's asking about something that would make the engine work harder to achieve a given speed. So certainly weight, drag, all those 4 forces affecting flight. If you're trying to climb at a steeper rate, you're not going to get the same speed for the same amount of power that the engine is putting out, or if you're heavier, or if you have more drag, so the gear is down, you have flaps out, something like that. And you will notice those things as you're flying, and it's a little bit harder to notice in something like a Cessna 172, but I guarantee if you take off and leave the flaps out for a long time, you'll notice it on, if you're trying to climb, or if you're trying to climb at a pretty steep rate, or a steeper rate than normal, you'll notice that you're not going to gain the airspeed that you need. So yeah, maybe it's not directly the same as in a car or a truck or a boat. You're still going to have those forces affecting the amount of speed that you're able to achieve. And I think that's the question that he was asking.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we all are familiar with, especially in the airline world, where you're very heavily loaded and it is a very hot day, so your performance is not very good. And just throw in a high density altitude, perhaps the elevation of the airport, and the engines are putting out as much power as you can get from them, and your rate of climb initially, it's just like, come on, let's go. But then on the other hand, coming up when the weather starts getting colder here in Atlanta in the late, mid to late fall, you start getting those crisper, cooler temperatures. The engines just love cool air and dry air, and you take off sometimes even if you're pretty heavily loaded and the thing is just like a rocket. Your VVI, your rate of climb is very amazing, especially if you're light. That's when you really notice it. You think, oh, this is what it's like to fly 757, I bet. But, anyway.
The only thing I can think of, Jeff, is that on an aircraft, we have a drag that's on the airframe that will oppose the thrust that the engines are producing. Now, that drag is at a minimum when we're at a speed called, funny enough, the minimum drag speed, which in my airplane would be about 220, 230 knots. Now, as you increase speed above that, your drag increases because now you've got a lot of air rushing down at the airframe there, and the skin is creating more drag. And also, as you go below that speed, you're increasing your drag because now you need to increase the angle of attack. You need to create more lift from the airframe, from the wings, sorry, to keep the aircraft airborne as you get slower and slower, and the air's moving slower and slower, which creates a lot more of a different type of drag, of lifter dependent drag. So anytime you're on the slow side of that minimum drag speed, we call it being on the wrong side of the drag curve. So we plot this curve of drag on a graph, and it forms a U shape. And when we're on the slow side of it, what it means is that if you start to slow down, you're going to need a lot more power to stabilize that speed. And the slower you get, the more power you need.
And sometimes you reach a point where you're not going to have enough power unless you descend.
And the other thing I'm thinking about that might be more applicable to Brian is when you start working on emergency procedures and engine out procedures, especially in a single engine aircraft, you're going to be working on your best rate of glide or your best glide speed, basically. So you want to know, you want to be able to maximize the amount of distance you can travel with your engine out to give you the most options for a suitable landing environment. And that occurs at a certain speed because below that you actually do incur more drag, and you won't get as much glide out of your aircraft. So that's kind of the same point that Nick is trying.
Yeah, exactly the same point. So that's what I would call bogging down. If you get on the wrong side of the drag curve and you're having to go up to full power, and if necessary you haven't got enough engines power left to stop that deceleration, you're going to have to stick the nose down and give up some height to get that speed back. So that's what I would see would be an equivalent of lugging or bogging down. I don't know.
Good point. Many of us have heard the term, man, I'm behind the power curve. And a lot of people don't realize that, at least in our world, that refers to what you just described, at least in the power curve for a propeller-driven airplane. In our world, as Nick mentioned, I forgot what you called it, but we sometimes you call it the drag curve, but we sometimes refer to it as the thrust required curve because it's not technically proper to call a jet engine airplane a power curve. But it's all the same kind of thing. And the drag that you were talking about above that L over D max, or the best lift over drag speed, is usually that parasite drag, I think is what that was called. And then when you get really slow or below that L over D max, it's that induced drag, the drag that's being created by the high angle of attack and the lift that you're creating. So it's all kinds of fun aerodynamic stuff that you get to learn about.
Physics.
Yes.
And by the way, I do call positive climb. I just couldn't get that call into my head there for a minute.
I thought I heard that it wasn't specifically your airline, but I knew it was a.
That's a standard Airbus call.
Okay, maybe that's what it is then. It's aircraft specific positive climb. I wonder if our guys.
That's what the manufacturers suggest. I don't know.
I wonder if that's what they do at Acme, the boys and girls that are flying the Airbuses. I'll have to ask that sometime.
I think we always say positive rate just in the GA world.
Yeah, and that's all I've ever said in my entire flying career is positive rate. Which is weird because when you're flying in an airplane that has fixed gear, I'm always waiting for somebody to say positive rate or somebody, to say gear up. and it just doesn't happen because you don't need to put the gear up because it can't come up. Kind of weird. Anyway. All right, great questions. Thank you, Brian, for that. And let's see, what else do you say? That he's going to be, he's working on his private pilot license, so good luck with that. And that's great.
Keep us up to date on your progress. Let us know
Absolutely.
how things are going.
Please do. And looks like that may be all that I had in our show 287 folder, unless I skipped something. I think I got it all.
No, I think you got everything.
Wow.
I was looking.
Yeah, it's about time because we're getting close to that 3-hour mark once again. So let's see. If you want to learn more about the program, the show, head over to airlinepilotguy.com. Great website that has all kinds of information about the community, the crew, merchandise, the coffee fund. And
it's going to have a new page.
It is, yes. We're working on something that many people have said, I'd like to be able to just go and listen to all those wonderful plane tales. And our lovely Liz Piper, APG community member, has been working hard to keep track of all the different plane tales episodes and where they were located in the actual shows. And we're going to take it actually even one step further. And using all that great work that she did, we're going to have a special page where you can go to and listen to each of the Plain Tales episodes individually. And you can even, if you're really geeky, you can subscribe to that RSS feed and have each and every one of those available on its own separate feed. So you won't have to listen to me or Steph or Dana.
That's the fun bit.
No one wants to hear us drone on and on and on.
Right.
Just get right to the meat of the show.
So we'll let you know. We're working on that. As I said, it's in its infancy, but we hope to have, maybe by the next show, we'll be able to say, hey, check out this new page. They're all there. And there are a few there right now, but it's not quite ready for prime time. So just listen up for when that's going to be live. And thanks again, Liz, for all the super hard work of having to slog through. Is that a word? Slog?
It is now.
Through.
Slog.
But I think I added an H in there. Slog.
To make it even extra.
Make it even worse.
Difficult sounding.
Yeah. To through all those episodes to hear the precise point at which the wonderful plane tales occurred. And anyway, so we did a lot of the heavy lifting for us, and we do appreciate that. And let's see, we also have these apps that many of you have, which allow you to listen to the show, watch the show, send in feedback, and also get push notifications if you have it set up properly for when we do the show recordings and when shows are released. So check that out. And social media.
You can find us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @APGCrew. You can tweet at all of us there, and we will hopefully get back to you, answer your questions. Go to www.facebook.com/airlinepilotguy. Stuff is posted there not only by us, but also community members, things that are aviation related and of interest to the community. I think that's it for the social media.
Hillel, are you in the bathroom over there? Come on out.
APG listeners, please join us on our Slack team. On Slack, we share news and ideas. We suggest episode and Plain Tales topics. We plan meetups and events. To get into the Slack team, please send me a tweet with your preferred email address to @hi11e1, and I'll send you an invitation. That's Hillel @hi11e1, and see you in Slack.
Thank you, Hillel. He was actually in the closet. He wasn't in the bathroom this time. Thank you. Appreciate that.
He spends a lot of time at your house.
Yeah, well, we like hanging out together. He's a little shy though. He doesn't want to be on the actual show when we're doing, just at the end. All right. And let's see. Anything else before we sign off, Captain Nick? Anything?
I don't think so. Heading out to San Francisco in a couple of days on the 1st. So the meetup on the 2nd will be perfectly timed. And then I've got a Newark on the 9th of the 9th. Yeah, there you go.
And the 9th, that sounds familiar. 9th, September 9th. Why is that day ringing a bell?
The number of the month.
Oh, I know why. It's Captain Nick's birthday. All right. Don't tell anybody, though. All right. Steph, anything before we close it?
Not that I haven't already said, although we really didn't mention where Dana was on this show.
Oh,
and
that's
some people
right.
were asked. So Dana, we didn't forget.
Well, where is Dana? I didn't even notice you. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, he couldn't make it today. He's flying, I think, today.
Yeah, he's working. So
yeah. So we missed you, Dana. Next time, though, he said his schedule this week is just crazy. We really do work hard to try to get all of us together at the same time during the week, but sometimes we do it and sometimes we miss. In this case, we're missing Dana, so we'll have him here next time, I'm sure.
Hopefully your work day is going well and not too stressful, and you enjoy your family time later this week. So.
Absolutely. And let's see, next week for me, I'm doing a 4-day, leaving on Monday, Labor Day here in the U.S., ending up in Des Moines, and then Canton, Akron the second day. The third day, I don't remember where I'm going to be. I should probably look. Sarasota on the third layover on the trip on Wednesday, and then back home on Thursday. So that's it for me. And for now, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care, and God bless.
Cheers, y'all. Unmute yourself, Nick.
I didn't want to say goodbye. I was just going to sit there and let it all.
You just wanted.
I'm only joking. Thanks, Steph.
You're welcome.
God, I'm getting old. Bye, everybody.
Good night.
We'll just put the bye everybody in the audio. They'll never know.
You won't.
He won't.
Yeah, I will.
He's not going to change it.
You
I mean, he
never
will. It'll
change
be in the
anything.
audio, but he's not going to delete the part that came before.
Oh, not in the video, no. Yeah.
Or on the audio. You never do that on the audio.
Yeah, I do. I try to make you sound as smart as possible.
It's a difficult task.
No wonder
for all
it
of
takes so
us.
long to get the show out.
Well, me too. I mean, I'm trying to make us all sound, somewhat intelligent.
A difficult task.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody for spending the time again. This what day is today? Tuesday afternoon. Yeah, a little bit earlier than we normally do it.
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday for you already. Yeah, it is. Right. Yeah.
He's in the future.
That's been
Yes.
for the last hour.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this didn't interrupt your sleep schedule too badly. All right.
What did you say?
Yeah, nothing. Don't worry about it. Okay. Yeah, I guess we should. Here, I got turn off this recording. Boom. Yay. It recorded.
It was a short show. It was still 3 hours, Landon.
It was
It just
2 hours and 50 minutes, but I don't think we started right at
No, time flies though when you're having
2:45 probably.
I kept the plane tail down to 16 minutes.
That's awesome.
There you go.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, Landon, I wouldn't say this is quite a short show.
No. I didn't want to blow too much smoke up those Harrier pilots' backsides.
Because they don't need that, do they?
No, they're egomaniacs.
They're just fine on their own. Oh man, your mom's birthday is also on the 10th. The 10th of September.
Yeah,
Yeah,
her birthday was.
it used to be a good
okay.
time of the year to have a birthday, apparently.
And of course, the 11th is not a good day for us to
Not
You
be
just
over
have to
here.
think what was happening 9 months previous.
Well,
Beginning of January, those cold winter nights.
yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Indeed.
Thanks, everybody.
We have no commentary on that, apparently.
No.
All right.
I
Have you
heard from
heard
Elise Lane. Yes, she's moved companies. She now no longer is a flying instructor with Royal Western Australia. Well, I can't remember the name of the flying school it was. She moved from them to teach Singaporean Airlines students, and now she works for a millionaire who has a fleet of helicopters and aircraft who does very expensive trips down to the wine growing districts and
Such
the
a
beautiful
tough
sites
life.
of WA. It is.
Oh, nice.
And she helps front that company as well as flying with them.
Awesome.
So she's really enjoying that.
Good for her. That's great.
Is that Steph or me?
I think it's me.
Okay. It's Mike watching Netflix.
No, he's not. I think he left.
Oh, never mind. That's all right. Your signal was nice and strong for most of the show.
Yeah, just trained a tiny bit then.
Yeah.
Just and maybe just a little bit. That was like the second time, but I mean, it was like at the very.
No, I
end
did
of
it
the
once
show.
before too, because I was like talking and then you guys were not, and I was like, uh-oh.
Why are they just frozen looking at me? Did I say something wrong?
Yeah. I don't know.
Anyway, so look forward to, as I mentioned there at the very end, the Plain Tales page on the site. And is Liz back from walking the dogs? Maybe not.
I don't think so.
Oh, and Brian, I didn't realize that Brian that I just read feedback from was Brian Parrott.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool.
And he's about to head out to go flying. So
excellent.
Yes.
All right.
Keen.
We're going to shut off the YouTube broadcast. Again, thanks for hanging out with us, folks. And
absolutely.
Next week, who knows when we'll be doing this, but we'll try to let you know as soon as we know. Bye.
Sounds perfect.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Good night.
Have a good day.